Welcome to the Purple Political Breakdown. To be fair, though, I think most moderates have pretty bad opinions. Not gonna lie.
I agree.
Bro, it's just me. I think counterpoints. He's moderate, so he has pretty good opinions. If it wasn't, I guess, if it wasn't for this recent like progressive craziness, I probably would be like a liberal. But like, they're just crazy.
I think that's
now.
how most moderates are. Like they're libertarians at core, which is always what fit into the Democrats. But the Democrats went so crazy to the just astronomically crazy to the left that now you guys are just moderate, but you're libertarian, liberal at your core.
Are you enjoying today's podcast episode? I really hope you do. And I really hope you enjoy the fact that I have an amazing guest talking with me and having this great discussion. If you, as an individual, personally have your own podcast and maybe you want to have great guests on your podcast as well, I got a deal for you. In my description, there is a link to something called Podmatch. Make sure to join that link through my affiliate link so you can sign up to get matched up with other podcast hosts and podcast guests so you make sure you are never missing an episode without a productive guest to have an amazing conversation with. Podmatch is similar to any other kind of matching site for the most part, and it's super easy to use. Just $6 a month and you can have a guest for each and every podcast episode that is tailored to your specific topic. So again, join the link in my description and join Podmatch now. Do you want a great website like this? This is my podcast website where I direct the audience to come to, watch the content, listen to the content, read the blogs, and much, much more. If you want to have your own customizable podcast website, then join my affiliate link in my description to sign up for something called Podpage, and they can help you customize an easy podcast website for your personal podcast. Sign up to get a discount now. Again, use the link in my description to join Podpage now. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your boy, I am your guy, I'm your host, Riddell Lewis, and I'm here with my co-host, Jonathan. How you doing, my guy? It's been a while.
It has. How are you?
I'm doing all right, seeing all these, Republicans in my feed has been a lot of interesting since I started talking about the Republican nominees and debate panel. I don't know if you saw my recent Vivek video.
I watched some of it. Yep.
Yeah, a lot of Republicans were pissed in the comment section for that.
I saw that. I scrolled through like 158 comments when I looked at it, and it was just like it was a mixed bag actually. I was
There's
surprised.
a decent
Like,
amount though, like agreed with me. Decent.
yeah. I think it's from everything that I've heard, people are relatively split on Vivek right now, which I think was kind of his goal in the whole debate was to be a lightning rod. But it was pretty split on him on my
Yeah,
side of
I,
it.
I would say this. The only thing that surprised me in the comment section is that some people said that he's a better version of Trump, which when I heard that, I was like, wow. I don't know if this was Vivek's goal to be the better version of Trump, but like
I have opinions about it. I don't know if we're gonna still talk about dating
Oh,
culture or we
no, we're not. The guest is not showing up today.
okay.
So
I
we're
did know that.
actually going to talk about the Republican panel again. Now, I did drop an episode giving my own personal thoughts about it, but I thought it would be appropriate to have other like thoughts, of course, yours since you are Republican, and have a little bit back and forth before we kind of move on from this conversation until whatever else
Sure.
happens. So we'll
Sure.
dive into that in a second, of course. Before we dive into that, I'm going to read off a review. It's been a while since I do that. Make sure you guys leave a review in Apple Podcasts, leave a 5 stars on Spotify. You can do that on my website, www.purplepoliticalbreakdown.com. And I'll try to like find other content to read comments as well, because like you guys leave comments in a lot of places. So I'm gonna try to get, read a few from other things as well. But with that said, this review says, certainly challenge my viewpoint, and in general, it can be a bit difficult to follow because of the overall cadence. I will slow down. I can, talk a little fast. Um, and speed with which the host delivers his speech. That said, it conveys his enthusiasm, which I can appreciate it. Appreciate you, my guy. That's what I try to do. Sometimes I notice I talk fast. But I gotta calm down, be calm, cool, and collected. That's how you
Hmm.
capture the people. You know what I'm saying? Get that
Oh yeah.
Trump cadence. You know what I'm saying?
Haha. Yep.
Um, Before we dive into the main topic, talking about the Republican panel and here's some back and forth regarding that and the nominees, we're gonna do our "What You Need to Know" segment, and I'm gonna do a deeper question that I'm curious. There's another question that is so deep. It's about marriage, and honestly,
Oh.
that will be a controversial episode when we dive into that. But this is a
Well,
different
let's hear
question.
it while I'm here.
Well, I don't. I'll make sure you're here for the episode where I ask this deeper question, and it's gonna be about the standards of marriage and what it should be. But we'll just hold our horses for that. With that said, what you need to know, what is going on in society today? The BRICS alliance announces 6 countries will be joining its bloc of developing economies. The alliance, comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, invited Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, Egypt, Argentina, and the United Arab Emirates to join starting January 1st. Now, there's some, voices from a lot of different sides. Um, as of right now, BRICS currently represents 40% of the world's population, over 25% of global GDP. With the additional countries, they'll claim 46% of the world's population and more than 30% of the global economy as they try to replace the US dollar and try to replace the US economic power. With that said, if you look into GDP per capita, the America and its allies destroy all these other countries. So, not as terrifying as people try to make you believe, but it's definitely a situation we have to consider for sure. Another thing that's going on is the Maui County sues Hawaii Electric over alleged role in sparking deadly wildfires. One of the litigation attorneys, John Fisk, who's representing this county for their civil suit, indicated that they should have had energization programs and that they should have had taken proper action in dealing with the potential, you know, power lines and their potential damage that they can have on nature and the
Sure.
ecosystem.
Sure.
Now, the president did come back saying that they did not have a de-energization program, so I don't know why they brought that up. And a program like that could be very damaging to all the uh, people who are um, medically inept, who are relying on power from these systems, and potentially having this program can make these medical systems shut down, which could be a potential issue, is one of the things they argued. And the last thing, the Department of Justice is suing SpaceX over alleged discriminatory practices, violating the Immigration and Nationality Act because they won't hire anybody that was not a U.S. citizen or had a green card. Basically, they're saying that they were discouraging asylees and refugees from applying to the company, and the Department of Justice says that is bad. So, a few things going on in society. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a ridiculous thing to sue a company over. Personally, I think if he wants to hire people who are from America, I don't see the problem with that. Maybe I'm misunderstanding that to a certain extent, but I think I think that's kind of silly. I think the Maui thing, I think, they should do anything that they can do to get money and to get support for, the rebuilding of their homes and economy and city in general. Um, and then I have heard a lot about that BRICS thing, the BRICS alliance. And I think it's, as of right now, a menial um threat, but I certainly think it could grow, especially if it picks up some higher GDP countries. I think that that shouldn't be something that we dismiss. I think it could be relatively catastrophic if we don't get our own economy back on the wagon, um, and producing higher economically statused dollars, I guess. Think about how I wanted to word that. But
Yeah, it's very interesting to me when it comes down to people's outlook of America from other countries, because a lot of them, from other countries, the biggest reasons why they are dissuaded from us is because of the ideological rhetoric that we're spilling from the left onto their countries and their culture potentially. And there's a certain level of fear that obviously there's always going to be a fear of America is the strongest military, America is the big baddies of the entire world, America is the economic power that everybody has to lean to. That stuff will never change. As an American, you never want it to change. But we should obviously make less reasons or put out less reasons for other countries to hate us as much as possible, other than the obvious ones. I think that will be
yeah,
important moving forward for sure, especially since we're all becoming much more interconnected.
yeah, I don't think there's much that we can do about countries hating us as long as we're acting morally and justly. Um, but certainly we should encourage people to be trading with us and to build alliances with our dollar, not trying to undermine our dollar. And that's I think one of the reasons that they're able to even undermine the dollar is because the dollar's been getting worth less and less over time, and so this is an ability when the hand is strong and it's worth investing with that, there's no reason to undermine it. Just like when you have a good just king or a good just government, you're not really concerned about undermining him. But when you know that he's weak and failing and not being the best that he can be, that's when you seek to undermine a government. And I think that's what we can look at our dollars. Our dollar is not worth as much. It's not as beneficial to be trading with our dollar. They can come up with something better. And so of course they're going to try to undermine that. And I think that's what's going on right now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how everything goes forward. But with that said, I mean, China and Russia are not in the greatest situations. Russia's in terrible economic situation right now. Like their currency is worth absolutely nothing at the moment.
Oh yeah.
And China, they're like in a weird situation too. Obviously, they're still a powerhouse, but like their people and the humanitarian crises that's happening in China is getting worse and worse. It seems they're
Oh yeah.
even having trouble like keeping their population up. So China and Russia are trying to do things, but Russia's in this war with Ukraine, and China is starting to look at Russia like, hey, you might be going a little too far, honestly. And they allegedly they were like, hey man, you may want to chill. So we'll have to see what goes on with that. Oh, speaking of Russia, and I might as well bring this up since Jonathan's here. What do you think about the alleged assassination of the Wagner
Ah,
Group
of
leader?
Yevgeny Prigozhin.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. If you what's the saying? If you swing at the king or if you shoot at the king, you best not miss. Um, he took a swing at the king, he shot at him, and he missed. So I'm like, you should know better if you are a crooked warlord sort of person, who runs this like black ops military contract company who you've been doing backdoor. If you are literally that person and you are coming for somebody who is also that person, like the former head of the KGB, has like rigged elections since he started, has a track record worse than the Clintons, I would say, of potentially of chefs mysteriously slipping and falling and of couriers just disappearing. Like you should know, like, oh, he's not just gonna let me get away with this. Like, come on now. Come on now. I think that's you shouldn't have got on a private jet and flown right past Moscow. Like, come on, guys.
Yeah, that was a L move on their part. But I
Like,
am curious on the reception of Putin doing this in Russia, unless they kind of
he didn't even
concealed
address
everything.
it. I guess as far as I know, he did a press conference like a day after it happened and didn't even say a word about it. Didn't even
Technically, it is all
acknowledge it.
alleged, so like, I guess he
Well,
doesn't
they
have to
found
talk
his
about it.
they saw the plane crash, right? I mean, the plane everybody knows that the plane crashed and that he was
Yeah,
on it. I'm sad if there was, like, innocent people on it, but to my understanding is it was him and some of his staff on his own private jet.
yeah.
So, like, it's sad, but it's also like, are you surprised?
I mean,
I'm
if
not
you're in that
surprised.
field, you only can feel sorry for them. So much, so much. Well, yeah, very surprising situation. Russia doing Russia things, so I guess we can't really be surprised at the end of the
Russia
day.
do what Russia do.
Exactly. With that said, let's dive into our deep or deeper question of the day before we dive into the main topic, of course. And that question for you, Jonathan, we'll talk about a little bit. Is hitting your kid in any situation child abuse, or every situation child abuse?
No,
Why?
no. Excuse me. Um, I suppose I should clarify, right? Like, what do you mean by hitting?
So, well, the reason why I stated it that way, so like anytime a parent puts physical harm, like smacks them, punches them in the arm, anytime that happens, we're setting a standard first. So, anytime that happens, would that be child abuse? And you said no. And
No.
I would also say no. But obviously, we have to go deeper to okay, what exactly you qualify as child abuse, and what do you exactly qualify as justified punishment in terms of smacking your child?
So there's a couple things. And it's funny that you say this because my dad has just preached like 3 sermons on discipline and how we're to be disciplined and how a just and moral parent is to discipline their child. One of the things that the Bible is very explicit about is spanking. Um, and spanking your child in the appropriate manner is the best thing for them. Um, it, I could quote a bunch of scriptures about it. That there's obviously the one spare the rod, spoil the child. I think that one's misused and misapplied sometimes. But there's a study that I can send you. I can ask my dad for it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that was a very famous study that we actually talked about in my psychology class. Um, as it because it was coming out that the study was a bad study, uh, during the time I was taking the psychology class and during even the section that we were talking about raising children. And what this study had claimed, and this was a study that was standing for like 14 plus years, and it said that spanking your child is bad for them. But they didn't do the study right. It wasn't conducted very well, and they missed a lot of it. And what they found out when they revamped the study and like applied a slightly more rigorous standard is the children who got spanked appropriately turned out to be the most productive citizens in every single category, in every single standard, by every single metric. They made more money, they were married for longer, they had more children, they were got higher educations, they contributed back to their society more by every metric. So
Okay.
no, spanking
Yeah, send me that
not
study, so I want to get in the habit of putting all
yep,
research links
yep,
for the
I will.
podcast. But yeah, go ahead.
Um yeah, so that alone proves that spanking is not child abuse.
And what can you
There's a
define what you mean by appropriate spanking?
yeah. So the way that the Bible lays it out and the way that in this to have the best outcome, this is the way you do it. Just like with our legal system, it must the correction and um the rectification must happen instantaneously, as fast as possible. Science has shown 3 seconds. Within 3 seconds of the infraction, you have to have told the child, "This is what you did wrong, and this is what you're getting punished for." And so when it comes to spanking, excuse me, when you do something wrong, immediately say, "This is what you just did wrong, and now there's gonna be a punishment." And so for me, it looked like I infracted, whatever I was doing, and my parents told me to go up to my room, or not my room, the office. And then they'd come up, and what they did that I give them credit for is they never spanked me when they were still angry. So if I did something very egregious, like one time broke a very expensive vase because I was goofing around and doing something I knew I shouldn't have been doing, because I never got spanked for doing something, which is another key thing. I always got spanked for disobedience. So when I was jumping on the couch, they said, "Stop jumping on the couch." I kept jumping on the couch, and I broke the expensive vase. I wasn't getting spanked for jumping on the couch. I was getting spanked for disobeying a direct order from my parents. Anyways, when you're angry, you don't discipline your child. You calm yourself down first. If you can't get yourself under control, how are you going to get them under control? Once my parents were under control, I got spanked and I was told, "This is why you're getting spanked again." So I was very clear on this is what I was getting spanked for. And then afterwards, they told me that they still loved me and they bound up the wounds afterwards, which is the biblical context for it. When you don't do all of those things, that is when I think you encroach upon child abuse, right? If you're doing something wrong and you just come up and smack your kid on the back of the head, that's none of that is right. They don't know what they're getting hit for. They're there's a lot of miscommunications there. That's an improper hit. You're supposed to I always got spanked on the butt. That was it. That's the only place that you got spanked in, was on the butt, because you're not gonna do any sort of lasting physical damage. Like, if you smack someone on the arm repeatedly over and over and over again, aggressively, you can cause some serious damage. Can't do that on the butt. So there's a and this is what my dad said. You also never got I never got hit by a hand. This is a point that my dad made. Hands are made for loving and caressing. You don't hit with your hands.
So, honestly, a lot of the things you said are very interesting, very interesting. I'll come at this from my approach. I understand why people would say like, are people are wary of like smacking your kid. Obviously, a lot of this comes from either like a trauma or you know a circumstance in the past where you're completely off-putted. Those that's just like human nature. When they go through something that they can't kind of conceptualize, they're going to just steer away from it. At the end of the
Mhm.
day, because
Yeah,
like for me, I was hit as a kid, obviously. Now I live in a very traditional islander culture, life, family oriented stuff. So both Samoans and Jamaicans would hit their kids, and I'm both, right? So Samoans can get pretty violent, but they're trying to calm down with this newer generation. Shout out to he's a pretty calm guy. But also like Jamaicans as well. And my dad back in the day, my family was very, very disoriented. And my dad back in the day was going through a lot, of course, and a lot of when he would go, he definitely fed into the anger. He definitely went too far because he would hit me with a belt and it would like whip on my back and it would be like I got, I'm not gonna say what I was about to say. It would have been a tasteless joke. Nobody would have appreciated it. But that would happen. I would go to my school and my friends would go like, "Bro, what is these bruises on your back?" I'm like, "Bro, I got cooked, bro." Obviously, as a kid, that was very devastating, of course. And my dad learned from his actions and matter of fact, my half siblings, he'd never hit to them. So he went from one extreme to another extreme because
yeah,
my sister, my full blooded sister, says our half sister, and that she's kind of spoiled because of how our father treats her. So
sure.
there's definitely a nuance with this. So with that said, the reason why I wanted to point that out is to kind of enlighten my perspective as an individual that went through spankings or whatever.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's important for the audience because some people think, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, all that junk. But with that said, I can conceptualize at first, like if I didn't have my nuanced thinking, I would have been like, oh, I'm never hitting my kids. But after like maturing, growing up, you realize one, I stand by this fact: pain exists because it's the ultimate deterrent. That's what I truly believe. We wouldn't have pain receptors we wouldn't have pain receptors if they weren't to tell us that we're doing something wrong. We have pain for a reason. They're the ultimate
Yeah,
deterrent for like every single animal that exists. So pain is necessary. Obviously, it depends on how you utilize that pain. And a lot of things what Jonathan said is very appropriate. You should never feed into your anger when you're punishing your kid. You should obviously, show the more compassion and love than the punishment. Because a lot of families that are doing, like, child abuse is prevalent, is all they see is punishment. All they see is smacking and getting hit
Yes.
with a belt. That's all they see. They don't see the compassion. They don't see the love. So you
Yeah.
definitely need it there, and it needs to be controlled. Obviously, you don't want to be like, my family went back in the day where they would just grab anything and just start. Hey man, we're swinging. Hey, electric cord, swinging. Hanger, swinging. Hey, anything in my hand, swinging. You don't want to be like that. It needs to be controlled. They need to understand, because sometimes when kids, especially, they don't know how to rationale logic yet. So the best way you're going to deter them is going to be brief punishment, to associate action bad. That's the simplest way you can associate a bad action, is pain
Yes.
associated with the bad action. So
Yeah, there's something to be said for that, but it's not quite that simple. As you said, kids can't rationalize, right? So let's use the example that I had before. There's the concept of, like, the Pavlovian training, right? Training the dog. I'm not a dog. I'm a person. I'm a human. I'm sorry for all those people out there that are like, "Oh, my child is my dog." No, it's not. Your dog is your dog, and dogs are great, but they're not your children. By the same metric, I'm not a dog. I don't wanna be trained like a dog. If I'm bouncing on the couch, and then my parent says, "Stop bouncing on the couch. Keep bouncing on the couch. Knock the vase over." And then immediately, like you said, someone starts swinging at me, and I just get hit, and I feel pain. I don't know what I'm getting in trouble for. As a child, I can't rationalize which of the infractions did I get in trouble for. Was it bouncing on the couch? Was it breaking the vase? Or was it disobeying my parents? Maybe I'll associate all 3. And when I begin to associate all 3 like that, and there's no initial go up to the office, my parent calms down, they come up, tell me again what I'm getting in trouble for, apply the discipline, and then bind up that wound, because this concept comes from, the wounds of God are faithful. He is faithful to wound, but also to bind up. And so the binding up is the most important part, which is something you don't get with the Pavlovian cognitive behavioral therapy kind of approaches. When you do it like that, there are higher chances that you begin to fear your parents because they're not disciplining you appropriately. And I don't know what your particular experience has been, but I know other people that resent their parents because they got disciplined physically. But there's another concept, there's something else that happens, which has this kind of same outcome, and it's resenting towards the parents. If your parents hit you unjustly and they don't do it in the correct manner, you begin to resent them. But if you never get disciplined either, if you're the child that never gets disciplined, never hears the word no, you will also eventually begin to resent your parents because there's a key part of the relationship between children and parents that's missing. That's discipline and correction. Because parents, just as our heavenly Father, I think this is a particularly fatherly role. Our heavenly Father has a goal for us. He has something that he wants us to. He has a vision for our future that is better than our own because he's wiser and smarter. Just as our physical father, they're typically, not always, wiser and smarter because they have more years, they have age. There's the owl of Minerva flies at night, and that is the owl of Minerva signifies wisdom. It flies at dusk rather, and that's age. It's referring to age. And so our parents have a better vision for our future than we do, and that's why we are corrected. When I'm jumping on the couch, I'm gonna break the couch or break the vase. The parents have a better vision for my future than to break that vase. It's a very simplistic explanation, but that's what it is. And if they don't do that for you, then that's a key function that they're supposed to play that they're not doing, and that will also lead to resentment. The Bible, once again, says, "Parents, when you correct your children, provoke them not to anger." And provoking them to anger is causing them to resent you. When you're doing it, when you're doing the disciplining thing, and you're not doing it right, you will provoke your child to anger, and that's what we're not supposed to do.
yeah, like I said, a lot of these situations, of course, are very hard, very nuanced. And if you're just one of those parents to kind of provide y'all a alternative, if you're one of those parents and you just refuse to put your hand on your kid for whatever reason, which is perfectly fine, I still think you should abide by the idea that just talking to a child is not going to solve your circumstance. It's not going to help them understand because they can only understand so much based off their limited experience and their, you know, more simplistic brain function at the end of the day. So pain, I believe, still needs to play a part. And there's other ways you can go about it. Obviously, you can make them a stand on the wall and do a wall sit. You're gonna get pain from a wall sit right there. You can make them do push-ups. There are other ways to kind of abide by a sense of pain so they understand that the action that I just committed, and this is what people do back in the military. This would, if you're in sports, hey man, run laps. Like, there's a reason why all these things happen. Running laps is not going to help you be a better football player. You're running laps because you were bad, you sucked for
You
whatever
done
reason,
screwed up.
and you, yeah, exactly. You know, you're not doing push-ups in the military because it's going to make you stronger. You're doing push-ups because you screwed up. So there are other facets of pain that you could use as well in that are obviously needs to be controlled, but that are different, an alternative if you don't want to put your hands on your kids. Just because you don't put your hands on your kids doesn't make you a bad parent, but trying to talk with your kid like you're equals, you're towing the line of bad parent right there. You and your kid are not
Yeah, there's.
equals. I'm just
Have
saying.
you? Do you know who John Christ is?
John Chris, no.
So he's a comedian. He's pretty funny. I think you'd actually kind of like him. But he's got this joke that he does now. It's one of his new jokes about his sister at a Chili's. Like they're having a family dinner, and he's like, "Man, and the kids, they're just bad kids. Like they try to say like, oh, they're rambunctious or other, but no, they're just bad kids. Kid breaks a crayon, John at Chili's freaks out, starts whining and crying, and it's hilarious watching all the different people in my family. My sister, she doesn't believe in looking down on kids because that's judgmental. So she literally gets on her hands and knees talking to the kids equal. What do you need? What can I help with? My other sister, she's got rubbing crystals together, trying to what is it, manifest no tears. And then and then me, I'm just sitting here, it's like, man, someone's gotta hit that child. If that's you, if any of you are like that, if you ever see me in a restaurant and your child's freaking out, wink at me. I'll come over and I'll hit your child. It's just it's ridiculous that we think that we can talk to kids like equals. Like even me, I'm not an adult. I mean, I guess I am an adult technically, but I'm 20 years old. Even I'm not the same. Someone who's older than me, they can talk to me to a greater extent. But there comes a point in time when somebody who's older and wiser than me, such as my dad, often, and he'll say, "Listen, I know what's best for you." At my age, I can decide if I want to take his advice now. Most of the time, I'm going to opt to do it because he's smarter and wiser than me. If I was 12, it's a different story. It's and less of a story the younger and younger I go back. There's a certain point where we simply defer to people who are wiser than us and smarter than us. And
Exactly.
if you try to have that conversation with a young kid about listen to me, I'm smarter than you. You should do what I say. At some point you say, no, you don't have that option. You're going to do what I think is better for you. And you can't do that to other people's kids. I mean, sometimes you can. It depends on the relationship you have with the parents. But when
Yeah.
it's your own kids, you shouldn't be trying to rationalize a logical argument through the Socratic method with a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old.
Exactly, exactly. But with that said, you know, you can always have an honest conversation with the kid though. So, you know, it's very nuanced. Parenting is hard, with that said. But if you want to learn some good tips on parenting, check out our Nathaniel Turner episode where we talk about roles of
Ew.
parenting, of course. Great episode right
Go
there.
back.
Yes,
There we
sir.
go.
With okay, so let's dive into the main topic and talk about some of the Republican nominees. Now, I actually did a ranking of the nominees. I don't even remember the rankings, but I can kind of remember the generalized order. So let's obviously talk about some of the bottom nominees and then move our way to the more popular ones, of
Bergen.
course. Stop right there. Yes, this is a little mini ad. Don't skip. Don't skip. all I want to tell you right now is that at the end of the day, when it comes down to all the discussions I want to have, I want to be able to communicate with you, the audience. I want to be able to relay a message and receive a message from everyone and try to come up with these great solutions that I keep on talking about. So if you want to be part of the community, make sure you go to the website and sign up for not only the email list so you can get weekly emails from me for the podcast episode, informational sessions, all that great stuff, but also sign up to go on my Discord so you can be part of the discussions, debates on my live streams. So be sure to go to the website www.purplepoliticalbreakdown.com and go to the email list, sign up, and go to the Discord and join the server. Now back to the episode. First things first, did you hear what happened to Larry Elder? Apparently he's suing
Yes.
the
Yes.
RNC because of there
They
was some
screwed him.
screw up with him and
So
his
they tried.
votes.
Well,
Um,
I know exactly what it is.
yeah,
I was actually really considering working for his campaign for a little bit.
Larry
Or I
Elder
should say
guy. Okay.
volunteering for his campaign. Kind of. It was just a good opportunity that I thought would be beneficial, possibly. He's honestly not my favorite candidate. But I liked him. I like him a lot, actually. But what happened is he had a poll. I forget the exact name of the poll, but somehow or another, it can be tied back to Trump. And so he submitted his 3 polls that put him at 1% or higher in the vote.
Yeah.
So he had all of his contributions, but because it was an affiliated poll somehow with not even the Trump campaign, but like a holding of Trump, like somehow there's traced something back to him, they said that that doesn't count. And so they cut that poll out, and they didn't really give him enough time to look for another poll to submit. And so they
Yeah.
just said, "Sorry, you can't come to the first debate." And
Yeah.
so he said,
Because of
"That's
that.
ridiculous. That's ridiculous that you didn't tell us that. You didn't say that this is classified as a poll that you can't use, nothing like that." So, I think he's very justifiably angry with them.
I agree. He definitely justifiably angry. It would have been interesting to see what he brought on the table because
It would've been a cool.
from what I've seen, and I've seen very limited, he at the very least actually stands out a little bit more than some of the candidates. Who am I talking about? Well, for one, Tim Scott had no presence on the panel. Um, he didn't offer much. I didn't hold him in high regard. He didn't really say anything of note or of worth, in my personal opinion. So Tim Scott, I thought, was a pretty forgettable, and yeah, I think he's probably the most forgettable one. Now, you did say Burgum. And I would argue Burgum,
I know. You
presence
like
wise,
Burgum.
I would agree. He is pretty forgettable. But if you actually listen to what he said, I think he actually said something versus Tim Scott. I don't think he did. Tim Scott said he was going to fire 87,000 IRS agents. And I'm like, you're just going to fire the entire IRS? Man,
Well, that's all the new people that they hired. They hired those 87,000 new employees.
and then he's just going to
And this
fire
was
them all.
yeah.
Out the window, all these IRS agents. Yeah, that's such a crazy idea to me. But yeah, I just don't think Tim Scott said a lot versus Burgum, so that's why I held him in a little bit more regard. But what do you got to say about Burgum?
I think he has stupendous eyebrows. I think that's his defining feature. And being a man, as Ben Shapiro said, and I'm not a huge Ben Shapiro fan. Like I like Ben Shapiro. He's not my favorite in the whole wide world. But he said Doug Burgum, a man famous for his eyebrows and being a man named Doug Burgum. And that's pretty much how I feel about Doug Burgum.
Honestly, I thought when I was watching the panel, I was giving points based on what you said, not like I'm sometimes if you did something really like witty, like politicky, I gave you points. Like I gave Chris Christie a point when he called Vivek Chat GPT. I don't lie, I gave him a point for that.
Yeah, I
Um,
know. I saw that. Yep.
and I think I gave Nikki Haley a point, or yeah, I think I gave Nikki Haley a point when she said something about Vivek not knowing what the hell he's talking about when it comes to foreign policy. So, sometimes I give you, some politicky points. The things that stood out for me when it came to Birmingham is I think he's consistent when it comes to certain stipulation when for the federal government and their powers. Because he brought up, I believe he brought up the 10th Amendment, and I think this is important because I've said this before. Like, if you're going to say that the federal government should have limited power, but then tries to give them another power to create a federal type ban on abortion, then I'm like, at that point, you're kind of being kind of inconsistent. Now, obviously, I get the moral right. At the end of the day, morally, if you stand by that, I empathize with you, but it's bad to set a precedent of limited government, but also start giving federal government powers
Well,
when you
I
want
think
to.
I understand what you're saying, and I agree. And we've had the discussion that there's a lot of things that shouldn't be in the federal government's purview. However, I think that, you know, we have certain rights that are given to us by the Constitution, by the Bill of Rights. The quote "life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness" is not in the Constitution. It's in the Declaration of Independence. But what is in the Constitution is the concept of creating a better life for ourselves and our posterity. Is and how are we going to have a posterity if we keep killing them? Um, I think that the government, if their job, which I've said this, so this is consistent with my views, said this on the podcast before, their job is to ensure the human flourishing. And if you're going to ensure human flourishing and the flourishing of your citizenry, they have to be alive to be able to flourish. And so, yeah, you can make the argument that there can be a more limited government. But limited means that they have their hands in fewer bins, right? They have their hands on fewer pies with different plate spinning stuff. I think one of the things that they should have their hands on is living a just and moral life with actual life, like actually being able to exist. And that would mean making a federal abortion ban. Now, I think when it comes to the candidates and who expressed their views on pro life the best, I think Nikki Haley did a good job. I think Mike Pence did a good job.
Shout out Nikki Haley.
I think DeSantis did the best because his was the simplest and most straightforward. And he encompassed both sides of the argument, and that it is good and just and necessary for our candidates to be pro-life because that's a core value of the Conservative Party. So he said, "I'm simply pro-life." But he also then stipulated he went on, I don't remember exactly what he said, but he stipulated, "And I'll do whatever I can to push forward that agenda. Look what I've done in Florida." The problem with Nikki Haley is she tried to put herself out as pro-life, but then, like, backtracked and said, "But it's not really gonna happen, so why are we even talking about this?"
Yeah,
And
I don't think that's what she did. Now, when it
no, no,
comes to,
well,
do you want to say
I'm
something else?
yeah, so let me finish with that. It's true, she is correct that, um, it's gonna be unlikely to get a federal abortion ban because we don't have the House seats in the Senate. But I think she is I think this is kind of a lot of people's misconceptions and when they are viewing the Republican debate, that Republican debate had nothing to do with putting forth the most nuanced points. That was about swaying the general election or the crowd there. It was about swaying the polls. And when you try to have the super nuanced conversation that she was trying to have on that debate stage, she's gonna just make herself actually look silly in the eyes of most people, which is how most serious conservative and Republican voters kind of felt about her afterwards. She did good. She did far better than she was expected to do, but she didn't knock anybody's socks off because she wasn't doing what some of the other candidates were doing. That debate stage, there's too many people to have a full in-depth view of your political views. And when you say something like it's never gonna happen, then you open yourself up to the attack of which she was attacked on is like, "Oh, well, you're not pro-life enough." But DeSantis, that was, like, probably the best thing DeSantis did the whole night is give his pro-life stance in the manner that he gave it.
So when it comes to DeSantis, if I'm thinking about everything that DeSantis did, I might give you that might have been his best moment because everything else was terrible. Honestly,
Mm.
DeSantis did not stand out for me. I think he tried too hard. He never answered the question, and he wanted to stand out a lot, but he just never stood out, especially in comparison to Vivek. If we're talking about the politics game, now when it comes down to what you
I think
said in
that's a
terms of,
touch harsh, but
I mean, I'm just saying, I'm being honest. Hey, man, I'm being honest. But when it comes to the appealing to the folk, um, I definitely see what you're saying. You gotta play the politics game to appeal to these people who don't really understand this stuff. That's how I'm gonna put it. That's what from what I've seen, I just don't think people understand this stuff. They want to appeal to very generalized, ambitious statements that really have no substance. I was actually watching before I started streaming on, or maybe I was doing a podcast episode, one of the two. I was watching the Daily Wire doing the debate, and they were talking
their
about
their
everything.
backstage thing.
Yeah, they're talking about the backstage. They're talking about everything before the debate panel, and a lot of them were talking about a lot of candidates. And when I think Shapiro brought up Vivek, he was like, he compared Vivek and DeSantis. He said DeSantis was an individual who just like he gets stuff done, but he like sucks at the politics game. And then Vivek doesn't get anything done, says a lot of crap, but he's really great at the politics game. And that's
Yeah.
honestly that's exactly how I feel about Vivek. He says a bunch of crap,
So
and but he's really good at
I
the
think
politics game. But one more thing when it comes to Nikki Haley is that for me, I don't think she backtracked when she said it's not going to work. I mean, from what my understanding on what she said is that there are certain standards that we should abide by, and she named like 4 or 5 standards that are very, very reasonable for both sides in terms of bipartisanship. But she says a federal abortion ban is unrealistic based on the same thing that she was talking about. The Democrats and Republicans will never
yes.
objectively agree on this, and this goes back to Bergham's point at the end of the day, is if we can create an objective standard that everybody agrees with, not just Republicans, that everybody agrees with in terms of life, because I do think you can do that. And once we do, because most people on the left don't agree with like um like a late term abortion anyway. Most of them don't agree with that. Most of them don't think you should have an abortion till birth. Most people don't agree with that. But there's not an objective standard. There's some people who say 6 weeks. There's some people who say 12 weeks. Some people say 18 weeks, and
Yeah.
that's what they try to figure out when
So
it comes to life. If you don't have that differentiating feature, what's going to happen is like we're gonna have potentially a Republican up there. He's gonna make this federal abortion ban for 6 weeks, and then a Democrat's gonna come back. Oh, the 6 weeks is way too loose. I'm gonna change it to 12 or 18 weeks, and then it's just gonna keep on going back and forth, and we're gonna have the same
yeah.
problem we had when it came to Roe v. Wade in the first place. So we're just going back to a situation we were just under.
So I agree somewhat, and I'm not making the accusation that Nikki Haley is not pro-life enough. I did go back and I did a little bit. I tried to find as much as I could about what her policies were. I couldn't find a whole lot. Um, what I'm saying is that is practically speaking, for the purposes of that debate, what she did. So for the purposes of that debate, she said that she was pro-life, but then by initiating that conversation, the way that she did, at the timing that she did, effectively opened her up to the critique that she's not pro-life enough. That's what I was saying. And so that wasn't I don't think that was the right time for that kind of a discussion because Vivek played that game right. That's why everybody by and large practically says that Vivek won that debate because he got the most eyeballs. He got I think Mike Pence technically had the most talking time. But that's because he talks so slow. Um
Facts.
that he just took up the most time, but Vivek, the camera was almost always on Vivek, right? And that's what you wanted in that instance. You wanted more people talking about him because now more people are going to watch his old clips and your accusation of him that and we can talk about Vivek now. But your accusation of him is that he didn't really talk about any policy. Well, the thing is he played that game right because he didn't talk a lot of policy. He wasn't up there giving his nuanced perspective on things, but he got more people to know the name of Vivek Ramaswamy. He made, I think, some big errors. I'll give you that much. But now more people are going to be following him and actually finding out what his policies actually are. As for the Daily Wire and the backstage thing that you're talking about, I was also watching that.
I didn't get to watch
Okay,
all of it. I watched a good size. I probably ended right after they started talking about aliens, and then it was like, what?
yeah,
The aliens, bro. Just take over the
yeah,
conversation.
that's
Um,
hilarious.
well, I
Um,
would say this real quick. I'll say this before we dive deeper into Vivek. Is that I agree that he played the politics game really well. I've said that consistently that he plays the politics game extremely well. Like he obviously played it the best there. I would say second best would probably be, I would argue second best was Nikki Haley personally because I don't think DeSantis said much, but he tried to play the politics game. And if you want to say Chris Christie, then I get maybe Mike Pence. You could argue too.
I think Pence
But
did pretty well, all things considered.
I think I actually gave a decent amount of points for Pence, actually, without everything considered. But we'll talk about both Vivek and Pence. But the point I'm going to make here is I get the politics game and I get the purpose. I personally hate the politics game because what at the end of the day is just a bunch of false promises, a bunch of manipulation of the people. And when you have people like myself, like you, like people from the Daily Wire, like people from Young Turks, when you have people who actually understand what's going on in the country and in the politics, and you listen to people like this, and to be fair, not everybody's going to understand, so I get it. But when you have people like us listening to something that like what Vivek is saying, you realize that it's just manipulating the people. He's just playing a personality. He's none of the stuff he says is going to actually happen if he magically got into office. So it'll just be a bunch of false promises, a bunch of people disappointed who actually wanted these things get done, and then we would have 4 years of nothing happening. So my position is that I understand the politics game. I just want to make sure, I just want to help other people, more people, understand that this guy is just playing the politics game. He's not going to actually do anything he's saying. He may believe what he's saying, but all this is unrealistic standards that he's trying to put out there, and all of the things that he's saying is stuff that if they magically did happen in the country could destroy the nation in my personal opinion. So that I want more people to understand that it's go beyond the politics game and really think about
Yeah.
how the country should be run. So that's how
So
I
there's a
approach it.
there's
Go
a
ahead.
couple things with that I kind of agree with, and a couple things I disagree with. Um, I think the politics game is fine. That's what they're doing. I think if you can't look at it with humor, then
No, humor's fine. Lying is my
no, I'm
issue.
saying no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying observing the politics game and being angry with it, maybe, and I'm not leveling this attack at you. I just want to
No, you're
like for
good. You're good.
people like because this is kind of how my mom is, right? It makes her angry. Like, why are they attacking each other? Like, I'm on a YAF group on my campus, and that's what they're like. Why are all the candidates arguing with each other? It's like, what do you mean? Why are they arguing with each other? Like, they get upset. Like, why does Trump keep attacking DeSantis? They're on the same team. It's like, that's why they're attacking each other, because they're running for the same position.
Yeah.
That's politics. And if that upsets you, maybe you shouldn't concern yourself with politics. If it's just going to like agitate you, like it's an important thing, yeah, but I mean, that's part of the process. You kind of just it comes with it. Now,
Well, I
I'm
actually
interested.
agree to that. I agree that the debating is important.
Yeah,
The attacking of positions is important. Attacking of character, I think, is lame and cringe. But
I agree.
positions is important. All that stuff. My big thing here, my framing is lying, and that's the big thing. When you're just going out there
Yeah.
lying and manipulating
So,
people and just playing a
yes,
character.
absolutely. This is what I think. This is when it comes to Vivek. This is I think is the issue with that accusation. We don't know how much of what he says is bluster. When it comes down to it, we simply don't know because he has no track record in politics. This is the same accusation that people made about Trump. We how he's just saying a bunch of things. But we didn't know, and when he got into office, he made good on a hefty portion of those promises, as much as he could. I think this is one of the big differences between
I don't
Vivek
even know if that's
and
true. I'm
Trump.
sorry. I don't. How much promises did he really keep? I'm not really like I think credit to, and I agree with Republicans on this. Illegal immigration for the country as a whole, it's not great. He started out okay, but apparently he scaled back on that as well. So I
So
don't really
there's
know
a
how
lot of
much.
issues.
Go ahead. Yep.
I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot either, right? Because when I kind of became aware and started paying interest into politics, it was in 2019-ish, 2020, when it was at the back half. Like COVID is kind of what got me into really investigating politics. So that I'll admit that I don't really know a whole lot of the promises that he made. From what I have heard from people who I listen to, the commentators, the articles that I read, there are a lot of things that Trump did that people liked, and it was consistent with the kind of campaign he was running and the kind of things he said he was gonna do. I know he did obviously, everybody, everybody on my side agrees that if he did nothing else, the fact that he got Roe v. Wade overturned and got the 3 justices appointed was good enough. Um, that was a big thing. Um, I don't know a whole lot of the other things, but the point of the matter is nobody thought he would be a legitimate candidate because of what he did and the way that he talked and the way that he said things. I think this is a difference between him and Vivek. There's 2 differences. This is one that I heard and one that I kind of paid attention to and figured out myself. One that I heard. One of the big things that lost Vivek a lot of points is he constantly said that, "I'm the only candidate up here that's not bought and paid for, so I can actually say this, and everybody else is beholden to their super
Oh
PACs,"
yeah,
and
he
all
said
this
that a
stuff.
lot. Yeah.
He said that a lot. That was obviously one of his, and Mike Pence called him out, "Oh, is that one of your pre-canned speeches?" Like, "Well, no, honestly, it's not." It's like, "Okay, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Don't act like you didn't rehearse." Anyways, Trump did the same things, but there was a difference. He never made a blanket statement like that. It would be one candidate would come at him with something, and he would say, "Oh, yeah, well, you're bought and paid for, so blah, 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 blah." There's a
Yeah.
difference between attacking somebody back after you were attacked and making the attack initially. I think that was one of Vivek's big faults. Difference between him and Trump. A lot of the things that Trump did promise to do that he didn't end up doing is because he promised something that Congress really had the authority to do.
Yeah.
This is something that I've paid attention to, and I'm sure I haven't caught all of them, but a lot of the things, and Vivek said this himself. I don't know how consistent he has been with it because I haven't listened to every single speech that he's given. One of the things he said is all of the promises that he has been making have been within the presidential purview. So a lot of it has to do with reform of the bureaucracy, which is part of the EOP, Executive Office of the President,
Yep.
which means they're technically his employments. And he has been very specific to point out, listen, I'm going to cull a lot of that. And people come out and were like, oh, the title, whatever bill that allows you to not just fire people for any reason. He said that that law does not apply to mass layoffs, which is what he's going to do to the bureaucracy, mass layoffs. And he brings out, listen, if you don't have the authority to fire somebody, then they don't work for you. You work for them. And so a lot of the promises that I have noticed he is saying have specifically to do with jobs that the president could do. So it is reasonable that he could do them. He doesn't have Trump's excuse of, oh, Congress wouldn't let me. So that's what I would say about the Vivek. I agree, and it seems that he has some fluctuations with his policy and what he's putting forth
Yeah.
and what
Some
he
people
believes
did
in.
bring up
But it
that he
seems,
said a few things that he said. That he said something completely different in a book that he wrote, and people called him out for
yeah,
that on the debate panel. I never read the
I'm
book,
not
so I don't
sure.
know how true that is.
I'm not sure. I've read some of his book, but it's also like, I would kind of want, like, if you are we not allowed are people not allowed to change their opinions anymore? Like, is that a
Well, I
thing
don't
that
know. I don't know if Vivek admitted that he changed his opinion. So,
that's true, but Trump has done that all the time.
well,
He
Trump is
said
a
he's
liar.
like
So
Trump's done so many things like that, so come on, guys,
that's not a
that's
good comparison. See, okay,
yeah,
so this is me. Trump. I don't believe he's done anything. Oh, not anything. Let me just draw back the hyperbole. Let's be factual gentlemen up here. I don't think Donald Trump did a lot, especially compared to the promises that he said he was gonna do when it came to president, running for president. I think for the most part, and watching that Daily Wire thing, there's a lot of things that I actually agreed with, like Shapiro and Clavin. I agree with a lot of the things they both said.
I think Clavin's one of the most articulate.
Yeah, him and Shapiro said a lot of things that I agreed with, and one of the things they brought up, which I agree with,
Get
is
you
that
on the
Donald
good
Trump
side
was,
of it, baby. We'll
huh?
get you on the Daily Wire side. We'll get you on my side. Keep listening to them.
The problem with the left, if they don't have a good collective of like intellectual individuals. Honestly, the only one I like right now is Destiny. Shout out Anna Kasparian, you're coming on the good side. The Young Turks overall suspect. With
You
that
don't
said,
like them?
they say they were one of those people that was saying to Jones a bunch of like crap before, bro. Like they were saying like stuff about Kyle Rittenhouse as a murderer. Like they were one of those people that were just
Okay.
way too progressive for my liking. Like think logically. Come on, use your brain. So Anna Kasparian is coming around though. Shout out to her. But with that said, my a few things that they said about like Trump is that one, back in the day when it came to politics, which is I think me and you can appreciate, is like they would obviously focus more on the policies, attack positions, talk about what's the betterment for the country, and that there's a growing sense of disdain of the people when it comes to their viewpoint of the country, which is when Donald Trump, when he came in, that kind of resonated with him. Donald Trump perfectly encapsulated those people, and not only that, the person he went against, Hillary Clinton, is like one
Was
of the
just
most
hated.
hated candidates of all time. So it's
Right.
like it was a perfect layup for Trump. But then when he got into office, a lot of the promises he said he didn't really do at the end of the
Yeah.
day. And when it comes down to shout out a few things with helping the economy, some like small business owners did like some of the things he did, of course. His handling of COVID, a lot of people on the Republican side did not like how he handled COVID, of course. And
Fauci.
yeah, a lot of people didn't like that. He did obviously do his job in appointing Supreme Court justices, the Roe v. Wade situation, but now we want to create a federal ban. So I don't know. I don't know how much that actually helped. But with that said, he also inducted a FBI, new FBI person. Now all the Republicans hate him as well. So my biggest thing, like he did a lot of small
He had
things,
a
but
lot of bad
also
appointments.
yeah, he did a lot of things that didn't really do a lot in the grand scheme. Something that Clavin said that I agree with is that Trump made everybody his enemy as well. Like Republicans didn't really like him. Obviously, Democrats hated
Yeah.
his guts. So he like made a lot of enemies on all both sides of the aisles. Then he created an
Mm.
anti-establishment rhetoric. Now the Republicans and conservatives hold on to, where it's like, oh yeah, the system is bad when they go against Trump
Yes.
almost every single time. And obviously, what happened when it came to the election next time, the election fraud, and oh yeah, they stole the election from him, all this jazz. And so like my thing with Trump is uh like he says a lot of things. He appealed to the people, but when it came to action, he didn't really do a lot. And then when it comes to Vivek, and he's doing a lot of the same rhetoric now, I will concede that when it came to the executive powers, when it comes to tearing down the FBI, tearing down the Department of Justice, and a bunch of other stuff that he was trying to do when it comes to these bureaucracies, like technically, yeah, I mean, these are under the executive branch. Technically, I don't. I would have to see very, very strong logic on how getting rid of all these bureaucracies will be the betterment of the country, but that's something I would have to hear, of course. And I'm going to watch because people say, oh yeah, he has policies and interviews. So the Ryan Shaw, I'm gonna see that interview with him and Vivek to see. I think it's 2 hours. I might stream it and react to everything that he's saying with that and see what's happened. But with that
He's
said,
got
like,
one if you find there's one that's, like, entirely question and answer, where he spells out a lot of his policy stuff through I think it's on Forbes, the Forbes channel.
oh, I
If you look
mean,
up
maybe I'll check that out, especially if it's less than
couple
2 hours. Because I went in the comment section, and was like,
yeah.
give me an interview to watch if he has a bunch of policies, and nobody's giving me an interview.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
I think he's got one with Bill Maher that I've been listening to, and,
I like Bill Maher. He
on
pushes back sometimes.
he's okay. Um,
He's opinionated. He's
yeah.
opinionated. I
So I
respect
haven't
people
finished.
who actually are opinionated. That's just a respect thing.
I haven't finished that one quite yet, so we'll see how much policy he actually talks about in there. But the one in the Forbes, he spells out a lot of, like, his policy kinda stuff. You should listen to have you heard of Patrick Bet-David?
Yeah.
PBD
Have I?
podcast?
Yes.
So the
Oh no,
PBD
no.
so
Valuetainment. No,
yeah,
they've been way too red pill for me lately.
they're
Oh,
interesting. He's interesting. I don't know about the other hosts, but I like PBD. I like Patrick Bet-David.
Patrick Bet.
Um,
Is he
he's
the
he's the main one.
okay? Like
So they
the
have
was it Middle Eastern, Arabian, Indian, something
yeah,
like that?
he's, like, Middle
One of
Eastern-ish.
those. And I'm black, so I can't be racist, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, with that said, yeah, he's been a little kind of too red pill for me. So
I don't
yeah,
know.
I
I don't know.
don't agree with a lot of the things he says.
Regardless, he's got a lot of great, keen political insight to what's going on. He has some fascinating breakdown of what Tucker Carlson's been doing, and he's got some theories about that. I bring him up because he has a podcast where it's a town hall, is what he called it, and he just question and answers, interrogates Vivek pretty well, and gets, like, explicit, "Do you have a policy to do this?" sort of thing. So that
Okay.
one is good.
I have to I have to vet it a little bit because like I don't want people just giving politicians layups. Same thing with the
Sure.
RFK because I don't want people just giving him layups too. Like, oh, layup question to make yourself look good. I want to make sure it's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
let's get to the meat and potatoes.
No,
So
yeah, so yeah, for sure. I
So
agree.
I mean, I'll see. I'll probably watch one of them. Regardless, I'll probably watch one of them and react to it, to see like what Vivek's true stances are. More than likely, based off his rhetoric, if it's consistent with that, he better have very very sound logic to elicit a lot of the things he's saying because it just sounds like okay, the establishment's bad. I'm just gonna rerun it, and that's not how a democratic our democratic nation works. Where you could just tear everything down when you feel like it. So
Yeah, so that's one of
we're
the
gonna have to see.
mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think, this is one of the things that has made Trump popular, and I'm not on the Trump train, right? I think he's been a good president. I think of the last couple of years, the last couple presidents we've had, he's been one of the better ones, especially in just, like, if we're simply comparing, like, how much the cost of living is, how easy it is to exist in our economy, how easy it is to buy a home, by all these standards, um, he was better than what we have now. Not saying he is the best, I wouldn't even put him in, like, the top 10 of the best presidents, but he
Well,
was been a good
hopefully
president.
not. We're gonna do a president tier maker. Don't y'all worry.
Okay,
We'll see
okay.
where we put Donald
Um,
Trump at. But at the same time, because they did talk about Bidenomics, well, actually, the first question they talked about that song on that
yeah,
one.
I saw the guy, the Richmond, north of Richmond, I saw the guy did a reaction video, he said, "I wrote the song about those guys." Like, what are you talking about?
I'll be
It's
like, bro, imagine the first question of a politics debate would be about some song. Like, that's crazy. But they did talk about Bidenomics, and I just think, which I appreciate for Nikki Haley, because she didn't just do the blanket, oh, it's all Biden's fault. Blame Biden, blame Biden. She was like, oh yeah, I mean, it is Biden's fault, but it's also Republicans' fault when it comes down
oh,
to
sure.
it. So
We got a
she
lot
was
of
actually,
squishy Republicans.
yeah, they put in bills, and when it came down to that was also very bad during COVID time as well. And I mean, at the end of the day, like you only could do so. People need to realize like you only could do so much when a global pandemic happens, right? So to just
Yeah,
put everything on Biden is a little disingenuous. That's what I
well, he hasn't done a great job. That's I agree, there's a little bit of disin this is one of the things that they really accuse a lot of the Republicans say Trump really mishandled, is the fact that he shut the country down when there really wasn't a need to do it to the extent to which he did, and then the reason that we can put a lot of blame on Biden is obviously he kept the nation shut down for way too long when he got the power. We knew relatively early on that it wasn't actually that dangerous. Even under Trump's dominion, we knew pretty early on that it wasn't that dangerous. and that it wasn't something that the
Arguable.
whole economy needed to be shut down for. But then he kept it shut down, and then Biden kept it shut down.
I think another
That's
factor is that America wasn't the only country shut down too. All the entire world is basically shut down. So even if we were
yeah,
the
more or
only
less.
ones,
But then there's places like Italy that reopened and quit all the mask mandates within 2 weeks, right? And proportionately, they did not lose a whole lot of lives. Like, looking at the proportion, because we can't just swap numbers, we have to do per whatever metric, they did not have an astronomically high death toll. They had a very high contraction rate, but that's a good thing because if they're not dying, but they're getting the disease more, that means it's not dangerous anymore. That means they're becoming immune to it. And Italy did that really quick, and they didn't suffer a lot of death.
I would have to look into that. But at the end of the day, one thing I will say is that it's a very, very tough situation to be in when it comes to a global pandemic. So even Trump, like, I only can blame these people so much. Now, if you want to say like he could have done it better, I mean, I agree. He could always do things better at the end of the day. But when it comes to relatively unknowns, I don't know how much I truly can blame someone, which is why, obviously I like some of the nuanced positions. But to kind of go back into we were getting into we're talking about Vivek, Nikki Haley. Oh, I guess we might as well get into uh
Well, before we move on from Vivek, I think there's one other important thing that we should address.
actually we should, and I'm gonna let you ask for your thing, but actually we should go to like all the main points, and then obviously we could talk about Tucker Carlson and Trump's interview as well. But we should talk
I
about
didn't
all the.
watch it, so
I
I
did.
don't
I
know.
hated it and it was boring. But I'll talk about it
That's
anyway.
good.
But yeah, go ahead, and then we'll
Um,
talk about some of the main points that was brought up for the debate panel.
I think Vivek is not running for president. I
The
think he's
general
running for
belief, yeah,
VP. I think
yeah.
he's running for VP. I'm pretty I could also be easily convinced that he's actually, because in Ohio, we have a Senate election coming up relatively soon, so he could be going for that too, because he lives in Columbus.
There's a rumor out there that Trump put on his social media platform that DeSantis might drop out of the race and go back to run for senator of Florida. Is what Trump said. I'm just saying. Is what Trump said.
I have my thoughts about DeSantis and everything. We can talk about that too.
Let's go. Yeah, let's go in order for point by point. Might rehash a few things, but I mean, we talked a little bit about Biden. I guess we started off with Bidenomics. I'm not talking about their opinions about some singer. It was dumb. But Bidenomics. I guess we talked about that a little bit. I mean, I guess we should say this. Who do we think had the best point? Obviously, I think Nikki Haley had the best point when it came to Bidenomics. What do you think?
Oh, I could agree to that.
Team Nikki Haley. All right,
No, don't put me on that. Don't
let's
put that on me, Ricky Bobby.
let's go to. I think the next point was climate change. They had a kid ask a question about climate change.
Oh
Was the
yeah,
next
yep.
one?
Vivek
Um,
made the best point. Barring his everybody else is a sellout, climate change is a total hoax. But
well, we're gonna get to that. Shout out there's a podcast episode that should have already been out. Make sure you check that one out. We had a climate change experts come on the show, and their solution for well, one solution, they don't have an overarching solution, but one solution they have for climate change is that they found an algae that can absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So what they did is they created a paint using living algae that you can paint things with that will casually take carbon dioxide out the atmosphere. And the reason why,
casually take it out.
yeah, I'm like, you don't have to do anything. You just paint your house and it's just taking carbon dioxide out the atmosphere because the
Wow, so
algae
just
stores
okay.
the carbon dioxide, right?
That's really
So
cool.
that's what I'm saying. And I was like, this is such a great solution because it's unrealistic to think that you're going to turn off your television and stop driving your car, but all you have to do is paint. That's so practical, so reasonable, so easy to do. This is the type of solutions we need for society. Make sure you check out that climate change episode where we go in depth with that. But I just want to shout that out real quick. But yeah, what were you saying?
Um, climate change. The climate changes all the time, right? Uh, the Earth is warming, right? I've done my own deep dive into the science, into everything. I've read the ICCS reports. Um, I've read the UN reports, all that sort of stuff. Um, read the books on it. The globe is warming very, very insignificantly. Um, Couple other points I could make. Firstly, all the scientists said that if we didn't do something within 10 years, then there's no point. So then the damage is done. Well, so that 10 years that everybody predicted happened 2 months ago, I think. So viva la vida, right? It doesn't matter anymore. All the scientists said that the doom is upon us, so we don't do anything within 10 years. The 10 years happened. They also said that 60 years ago and 20 years ago and all the years ago. There's all that you could talk about it, but there's also this, and this is, I think, the most significant point, okay? More people, and I think I already sent you all these articles in the past, so you should have them, all the things I was about to say. Um,
Probably don't, not gonna lie. Probably want to send it again.
okay, okay. So more people die from cold deaths than from heat deaths every year, by a large margin, a large margin. So removing, um artificial climate control things, such as burning energy to run ACs or heaters, more particularly, removing those to stop people from heat deaths because the Earth is getting warmer, it's actually going to take more lives, right? So if the globe warms as a net collective, people's lives would be saved, even if the Earth does warm, because right now hundreds of thousands of people die from cold death as opposed to thousands of people that die from heat deaths. Not trying to minimize people's suffering and people dying, but if we're looking at it as a political level, as a problem that needs to be solved, the Earth warming is a net positive for total lives lost. The problem is does that make sense? Right? That's
It,
logical.
I get what you're saying. I just don't think that captures the full picture of the Earth as a whole heating up. But I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying.
There's a lots of very and that's because the pro climate change scientists paint such vivid images. Like for some reason the globe warming is gonna cause these hurricanes and things like that. But at the same time, every time that they say that like there's a super arid weather, that's climate change. But when it rains a whole lot, that's also climate change. And there's also the fact that they always say that the polar ice caps are melting, right? Well, they're talking about the Arctic. The Antarctic is growing, right? So the sphere of influence of the North Pole is getting smaller as the sphere of influence of the South Pole is getting bigger. So, like, which one is it? Like, that's going to be a net equal for the consistency of
You
the
said
ocean
the
waters, right?
Antarctica is growing.
Yes, the South Pole is growing. The last time, as I checked, right, I might have misread. I'm not going to claim to know that as
No, no worries.
100% fact,
We're not
but that's
doing
pretty.
gotchas over here. But
But
I just want to
yeah,
make sure.
yeah. As far as I know, the South Pole is growing as the North Pole is shrinking. Unless you're a flat earther, then it's all the same thing. But
Y'all go
anyways,
to the moon. Go to the moon. Um, So I definitely see a lot of what you're saying. Now, I personally do think climate change exists, but I also think climate change activists go way too far, and they can be extremely annoying.
I'm
Um,
gonna send you a book.
so there's definitely a lot that goes into it, and maybe we could have a full. I mean, if we need to, we can have a full episode on diving into the intricacies of climate change in the future. But with that said, my thing with it is that, I mean, if the Antarctica thing is true, then I can't deny that. My understanding is that the more that the North and South Pole keep on decreasing and rising the sea level, obviously that would be dangerous. But one thing that I again agree with, like someone like Ben Shapiro, I think humans can adapt to these circumstances. They just have to have the foresight to know, yeah, eventually this is going to happen. We just have to adapt because obviously the earth is consistently changing.
So
I'm not like I don't think of the apocalyptic nature of global warming and all that stuff, but I also recognize that the industrialization age has put a lot of very toxic, you know, stuff in the air for a lot of other places. Of course, some places it's even hard to breathe. So there's at the end of the day, when it comes to climate change, the problem is that the left goes too far, but at the same time, saying it's a hoax is also being very disingenuous because we know that our impact on the Earth actually did have an impact, from what I've seen. And if we can somehow create solutions like the solution I said with the paint and the algae, which is way more practical than turning off your heaters or ACs, then I think we definitely should create solutions like that instead of completely dismissing the idea entirely and just hoping that it never long term effect doesn't happen in the future. So
So
that's basically my take on that.
I just
Go
found a
for it.
report from NASA that as of 2015, it says that the Antarctic snow accumulation that began 10,000 years ago is currently adding enough ice to the continent to outweigh the losses. So
So it's
that's a
evening
bit,
out, is what they said. For
well, to outweigh the losses. So yeah, it's either growing or staying about the same. So it doesn't, it's a net
so,
wash,
and
essentially.
then the North Pole is decreasing.
I didn't re I just looked up to fact check my Antarctica claim. So,
Okay.
and that's just one. I could look for other ones, but there's a couple things that I'd say. I kind of agree that dismissing it entirely is disingenuous, calling it entirely hoax because the climate is changing, right? I don't think it's a crisis though. I think this is the issue. Is they're doing the same thing that they did for COVID. They said COVID is a crisis, so we need to do XYZ. It's not clear whether their XYZ policies are going to help climate change. What would help climate change is going over to nuclear energy because there's no emissions. I've yet to hear a good cause for why not to do climate change. They claim a lot of
I actually
the
agree to that. Which I actually said, Vivek, I agree. Nuclear energy, people were too scared of it for some reason. I mean, I
yes.
get why, because of the bombs, but
Well, it's
I
not the
agree with
bombs.
nuclear
It's
energy.
the
Well, that's
breakdown
why
of those
people are
things.
scared of it, is what I'm saying.
But there's so much stuff out there now saying the effects of them have been much smaller than we thought, and it was gross oversight, a gross lack of oversight when it comes to some places. Anyways, it's not clear to me that their policies are going to help. I'm sorry, but windmills aren't going to cut it. They're not going to help, and
Hey, I'm not
they
getting. We shouldn't get rid of windmills though. They still
no,
have a
but
purpose.
they're not feasible to turn all of our energy over to wind energy. It's
Agreed.
not
Agreed.
feasible to turn all of our energy over to solar energy. It is
Agreed.
feasible to do nuclear energy.
Oh,
And it's not
oh man, I saw this weird video, and I have to bring this up. I want to bring this up. If we could, because I saw a video and they're talking about like the levels in terms of energy consumption and the levels of humanity progression, that like there's different levels of humanity progression. We're on like level 2 right now, but if we were on level 3, we'd be able to travel to other planets. And the way to like increase the levels, the biggest way to increase your levels is energy, the I forget the word, but just utilizing energy the most efficiently as possible and absorbing more energy, obviously. So
yeah,
the best way to do that, shout out nuclear energy, but the best way to do that at the end of the day is harnessing more power from the sun, 100%. But we don't have an
okay,
efficient way to do that, as of right
yeah,
now.
okay.
I had to point that out for y'all.
The most practical way is nuclear energy. I'm just not convinced, especially having read this book and all the and looking at the science and looking into all the reports. Like one of the things they say is an effect of climate change is the level and aggression of hurricanes in the recent past. Excuse me. But that's not true. If we look back to data that we have from early 1900s, it's like essentially a completely even triangle after triangle after triangle of aggression and damage of hurricanes. Hurricanes are not any more dangerous, they're not any more harsh or damaging than they were in the past. If you just look what they displaying the number of the temperature outside, and it was a totally normal colored number. And then they lay it over with now, and it's like the red emergency temperature reading. It's like and they try to claim that's climate change, but 20 years ago, they weren't worried about that temperature at all. It was totally fine.
Yeah, I had to switch my headphones. So if a little audio key like blinked out, sorry about that. Because these things died on me. So, but yeah, overall, I mean, we both agree that when it comes to climate change, that they over exaggerate its impact on society. Now, I personally still think it exists. I probably think that it does have an impact, maybe larger than Jonathan exists. Um, but there's always things that we can do to kind of decrease our carbon footprint on society. The solution I said before is one great solution. We need more solutions like that, things that are practical and that don't take away with normal human, interactions throughout society. And there are other things that we need to do that I think that are important to keep the ecosystem and nature on its P's and Q's, right? Recycling, honestly, probably should be more of a incentive throughout because, like, my neighborhood doesn't even have a recycling bin. Like, you
We
just throw
need to talk about recycling at some point then.
recycling.
Recycling is
I
the
mean, if you
biggest
regard
scam.
regardless if you think it's a scam or not, if we can utilize more efficient ways to keep our ecosystem safe, it's like don't litter, don't throw garbage in the water, don't put oil in the water, don't put nuclear waste in the ocean. There are definitely things out there that we can make sure we're on our P's and Q's about to ensure that nature and the ecosystem is as healthy as it can be because, you know, this is our home, as they say. But climate change activists protesting in the middle of the street, preventing people from going to work. If you ever do that to me, I am running you over. So I do not feel bad. Don't do that. That's a terrible idea. That makes people hate you. And also the Armageddon personality makes people hate you too. Um, so you said Vivek. I'm trying to remember what other people said. I don't think a lot of people said
Nobody this is the thing is everybody remembers what this is why Vivek won, because everybody remembers what Vivek's answers were, but a lot of other answers people don't remember.
I remember Nikki
Everybody
Haley's, but I don't
what
remember
everybody
his.
remembers is either what Vivek said or what the people were responding to Vivek said. Like Nikki Haley responding to Vivek, Mike Pence responding to Vivek. Nobody remembers what DeSantis said the whole time except for 2 things. What I said even people a lot of people don't remember what he said about the abortion, but they do remember when he impersonated Trump. That might have been his best moment. Where he said he handed people over to Fauci, and I'd say, "Fauci, you're fired."
Yeah, I mean, he had obviously the only reason why people remember him for the climate change stuff because he called it a hoax. So it was like he has one-liners and he's like appealing to the people. He's being an entertainer, not a actual leader of
Oh,
the
yeah.
free world.
This is what Ben Shapiro pointed out, is he's great at being an internet personality. He's great at
Exactly,
it. He's
exactly.
great at getting the clicks and saying the things and all the stuff.
And he's smart because he started like interviewing himself on a lot of podcasts, which
Oh, yeah.
honestly, more politicians
He
probably
has
should
done the
do.
podcast circuit.
Yeah, go on different content creators platforms and showing your personality and kind of diving into these things in a little bit more depth. Um, so climate change. I mean, I like the nuclear energy stuff, but the fact that he said it's a hoax, I can't agree with Vivek. So that doesn't really help my situation. So I'm gonna go null and void because everything else, I think most people were saying it's real, but not as bad as people make it seem. Is I think is the general sentiment. Um, Next was I think it was like abortion, and
Yeah,
obviously
we
I
already
think Nikki
covered that.
Haley won, and you think DeSantis won on that one.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think Haley made a good valid argument, but I just think it wasn't prudent for that time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not
Like,
appealing to the dummies.
correct. Well, honestly, yeah. And there's going to be the dummies that are going to decide this vote. Because here's the thing:
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
all of the talking class, all of the people like us, the pundits and the smart. I don't, I don't call myself smart, but all the
Like,
smart
look at this
people who
guy
actually
being
know politics,
modest.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole
Um.
library in his room and he's being modest. Come on now.
Anyways, all the talking class people, all the talking heads, all the people who pay attention to politics, they already pretty much know who they're going to vote for. But it's all the people who aren't really paying attention to politics that are going to decide this election. And whoever can appeal to them, I mean, ultimately for the Republican side, for the GOP primary, it doesn't matter because all of those people were up there running for second place, which says everything. I
Yeah,
think
a lot
Michael
of them
Mallon,
are hoping Trump can't run.
yeah, something stops Trump, or they're running for VP. Michael Malice had the best. He summarized the GOP debate the best, and he made the best point. He said, all said and done, when he was asked who won the debate, he said, the Democratic primary base won that debate.
Oh, Joe
Because
Biden's winning. By the way.
I don't know about that. Well, this actually
winning
gets
an
back to the
election.
point that I wanted to make earlier that I forgot about. Something else that Ben Shapiro said, which I think is one of his best points he's ever made. Every election is a referendum on one of the two candidates. And whoever can effectively make the vote a referendum on the other is the one who wins. And so he pointed this out with Trump and Hillary. Everybody thought Trump didn't stand a chance, but Trump was able to make the vote a referendum on Hillary, which means more people disliked Hillary than disliked him, so he won. In 2020, whether or not you believe that the election was rigged or not is one thing, but enough
I do
people
not.
obviously did not like Trump. And they were able to make it a referendum on Trump and how Trump handles COVID and all that stuff. This election needs to be a referendum about Joe Biden and how bad Joe Biden is, and the fact that even if you think he's a good president, okay, which I don't, whatever, but if you don't believe that he is senile and dementia ridden and frail and essentially walking around stretched out on a gurney, he's not fit to be leader. And if you can't make it a referendum on that, then you're right. It doesn't matter who we run, we will lose to Joe Biden, especially with Trump making everything about 2020, which I think is important because he is being jailed. That is like an unprecedented thing for America. We have never before had a president, former or otherwise, arrested and put in jail. It's just an
Mm-hmm.
agreement that we have, especially when he's the political rival. We started the show off with talking about Putin assassinating his political rivals, and we're doing the same thing. That's crazy. That's crazy to me. But Donald
Not me,
Trump,
personally.
Donald Trump running around and saying how making everything about him is not helping with moderates. It's not helping with the wide swath of people who ride the middle, such as
Yep.
yourself, becoming appealing to him. Now, if his whole campaign was about all of the ills and faults of Joe Biden, because the media is obviously not going to help him out with that. The media shills for Biden on the daily, and all the corruption that he's been taking place in with his son's company and all that, not covered in mainstream media. If he can't make it about Joe Biden, then he's certainly going to lose, like you said.
Um, yeah, I mean the biggest the downfall. I guess you can bring up Hunter Biden stuff, but like that stuff doesn't move me. But I would
Well,
say,
it's not the Hunter Biden stuff. It's the level with which it has now been shown with testimony by Devin Archer that Biden was very much involved in all of it. So yeah, Hunter Biden has his ills with the strippers and the crack cocaine and the hookers, but it's the crooked business deals that Joe Biden is involved with at a deep level that they're just totally passing over because they do exactly what you just did. Oh, it's Hunter Biden, not Joe Biden. No, the point is Hunter Biden was peddling influence and making $80,000 a month by literally being the son of the vice president and having Biden call him on the phone and say, "Hey, Dad, what's going on? Oh, I'm good. How are you? See, I have direct access to the vice president of the United States of America. Now give me my $80,000."
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that doesn't really move me. I mean, he's just taking advantage of a connection. All rich people do that. Whether you agree with it or not, that's a completely different story. I don't agree with it, but like it's not a big enough deal for me to kind of make a big case out of it. But one thing I will say is I do think it's very valid to question Biden's competency. I do think that's extremely valid because one thing I will say is if Trump went up against Kamala Harris, he probably would beat Kamala Harris. Honestly, it would be a Hillary Clinton situation all over again. So
Probably.
it's a very interesting situation with Trump, with all the indictments and the potential imprisonment, and then Biden looking like he could barely stay awake for any amount of time. It's like these are our two primary candidates for the next election. Wow, that's kind of crazy, but we will see because who's the vice president? Kamala Harris and Vivek. Wow, that's a great VPs from our two primary nominees. That said, a lot of the things that you were saying about Donald Trump and how he should approach these things goes into the interview he had with Tucker Carlson, actually. Because I watched that interview he had with Tucker Carlson and I was like, okay, I'm curious to see what he's about to say. And basically, all that happened is he talked about the election that robbed him. They talked about Jeffrey Epstein, about whether or not he was killed by someone.
Yeah,
They
saw that
talked,
clip.
yeah, I'm like, and the fact that was funny for me for that one because Tucker Carlson kept on trying to say, "Oh, someone definitely killed him," and then Trump says, "Well, I don't know if someone killed him or not," and Tucker Carlson kept on trying to like, someone definitely killed him, and Trump just would not agree to that sentiment. It was kind of funny to me, not gonna lie. Tucker wants that conspiracy theory to be extremely true. Um, I mean,
I hear you.
whether or not it's true, I just found it funny that Trump wouldn't agree to it. What does that say? That Trump wouldn't agree to it. He's the anti-establishment guy. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe he's trying to like start a moderate campaign streak or something to
Or
maybe.
maybe he was technically close to Epstein, so maybe he was involved. I don't know. There's a lot of potential theories that can go on. So they talked about Epstein, the election. They talked about Sleepy Biden, obviously. Um, they talk about
Good
anything.
old Sleepy Joe.
Facts. Did they
Come
talk?
on, Joe.
Did they talk about anything else that mattered?
Didn't they worry about how are they trying I saw this clip too. Are they trying to kill you? Are they trying to
Oh
assassinate you,
yes.
Lord Trump?
Every time Tucker Carlson brought that up, I was like, bro, ain't no way. He kept on trying to bring it up. It's like, well, they can't stop you. So the only thing they could do is to kill you. Are you worried that the Democrats gonna kill you? I'm like, bro, what are these
Yeah,
questions?
it seemed like a little bit from what I saw and what I've heard about it, it seemed like it was very much a shill question. Like it was just a bunch of layups,
Oh
which is a
yeah.
shame because Tucker destroyed some people in Iowa. Like before the first like when they had a big convention in Iowa, like he was ending careers, it seemed. And I don't know why. This is what Patrick Bet David was talking about. Um, that they think, which I think it's prudent. I think DeSantis probably shouldn't have run. I think um, he could have continued on as governor and continued to do these things, been loyal to Trump, endorsed Trump, for people to go out and vote for Trump. Trump does what Trump does, wins or loses, whatever. Next year, DeSantis runs, and now he has the full support of the Trump base because he's Trump
That
2.0,
would have been
bigger,
smart, yep.
badder, faster, has a great track record in Florida, and then has the whole Trump base behind him. And then it's like a passing the torch thing that Trump goes down and passes it to DeSantis, and DeSantis comes up. Patrick Bet David thinks that's what Tucker's doing now. Tucker is forming an alliance with Trump and Musk. He has got the agreement with Musk on his platform on X, Tucker on X, or Tucker on Twitter, whatever you call it, giving lots of kudos to Trump. Trump's going with him. Who knows? Maybe Carlson ends up as VP. I don't know if that would
Oh
happen.
my god.
I don't know if that would happen, but
Oh
regardless,
Jesus.
Carlson does what Carlson does. He's got a fantastic show going on Twitter. He had the number 1 grossing show on, Fox. Whatever happened there, but he works with Musk, who's, who knows what Musk is gonna do, whether or not Twitter is gonna survive. I think it will. because
I personally think X, Twitter, they're doing a lot of great things. They're going to introduce apparently calls. Like you can call
yeah,
people on X.
he wants to turn it into WeChat, so you'll be able to do like Venmo, PayPal stuff on X as well.
Like
And so
it's going. I believe it's going in a very good direction. But when it
which is
comes,
not what you thought a couple months ago.
no, that was more Paul. I was always in the bank like, hey man, make it the public square that you're talking about, and we're in business. And I think he's going in the right direction.
Yeah,
Personally,
maybe it was Paul saying that it was gonna crash, but
yeah, Paul definitely thinks it's gonna fail.
I thought both of you thought for a second that it was not gonna make it, but maybe I'm wrong.
Nah,
Um,
I've been a low key advocate of X being
yeah,
better now than it was before, personally.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but with
but I
the
think
with the
oh,
Tucker Carlson stuff, real quick, um, yeah, I do think that a lot of that stuff was very layupy. I think it's a good point to say that he's trying to get close to Trump potentially. I mean, if you want to bring up Musk, then Musk as well. I think that's a very interesting point to bring up. Um, I'm definitely curious though, moving forward, how what what his goal is going to be when it comes to this space, because obviously he's not part of Fox News, and I don't know about, like, all these questions were just a bunch of conspiracy theory questions, to be honest.
yeah,
So I don't know what his end all be all is going to be with all everything he's
I wanna
doing.
know how he's gonna make money.
I mean, I think Elon's definitely looking into monetizing X more and more. So we'll definitely see we'll see what happens with that. Um, but yeah, that interview was it was okay. No, it wasn't. It was boring. I hated it. I just couldn't bear watch it. I got bored. Honestly, I low key was awake, falling asleep when I was watching the interview because it was just a bunch of rhetoric stuff and nothing was being said. Um, with that said, we went over a lot of the points that the nominees talked about, climate change, abortion. I guess we can end it. The education one, I guess there's two more. So we'll go first. We'll talk about the Ukraine Russia
Mm.
situation. When they talked about that, obviously, personally, I had Nikki Haley winning that, 100%. Nikki Haley did well, and I think Pence did well. I think those two for sure
I
did the
think they
best.
outperformed their expectations.
Yeah, for that question specifically, Vivek probably did his worst, honestly. He did not know
That's
what he
where
was
he
talking
cut the
about.
most flack because he's got a lot of good rhetoric when it comes to that, but with not much solid ground that he knows that it would work. I think he has a good point in a China-Russia alliance
That's gonna
is
happen regardless. So to give
yeah,
Russia Ukraine to prevent them to go into China, it makes no sense.
yeah, I agree. I think Nikki Haley had a good jab at him. I don't know that I entirely agree with her position on it in
Which part?
continuing to give money
To Ukraine?
to Ukraine. Yeah. Because what she put I don't know that it's not a pro she kept saying that that Ukraine's a pro-America country. I don't think that's true. I don't think they're not a pro-America. They're a pro-America right now because we've been shilling them a
Yeah.
bunch of money, but before that, they're just as crooked as Russia ever was.
No, I
I
agree, but
mean,
like depends on like obviously it really comes down to Zelensky, right?
yeah,
So
they're only pro-America insofar as America continues to give them money. So they're always gonna be pro-America as long as we're shilling them money. As soon as we stop shilling them money, then they're not gonna give two craps about what America thinks.
I don't know. I would it really would, because especially if they join NATO, then 100% they have to care what America thinks. So that's why
Yeah,
I'm
but
like I'm
I'm not a
curious
huge fan of NATO either, but
I mean, agree to disagree there, but I would say I have faith in Zelensky to kind of keep up the. I mean, it's not. They're not going to be a Western country in the East, obviously, but they're going to be more Western in the East than they were before, obviously.
I just disagree. I think that's a little bit idyllic. But to be fair, I'm not a Ukrainian expert, right? So I'm just one of these people on Twitter who all of a sudden became like an expert in Ukraine when it happened. I think I think DeSantis is correct in saying that this has been a border dispute, and I can say that because historically it's been true. for 1,000 years, literally, not quite 1,000, a couple hundred years, Russia and Ukraine have been doing battle over this border, over
Right.
what is Ukraine's and what is Russia's. It's happened. It will always happen. I don't. I think DeSantis won that in saying that. Yeah, it's a border dispute. Um, I think
Border dispute, but like Russia's took it another step forward in trying to take over the entire country.
sure, sure,
So I can't really say border dispute there when it's like it's at that point you're just trying to take away their sovereignty.
yeah, but I'm not sure. I think somebody at this point, giving the amount of money that we're giving them is
Nikki Haley said only 3% of the defense budget.
yeah, but I don't care about Ukraine.
But
Like
the
I think it's
problem is not
important.
Ukraine. The problem is if Russia takes Ukraine and then goes like, okay, I want to start messing with the Baltics, and then China goes like, okay, I want to start messing with Taiwan. All of this is bad for
Sure,
America. All of it.
sure, sure, right, and that's true. But I also think both DeSantis and Vivek made a good point in that if we're concerned about border disputes and people invading other people's countries, what about our own border? See our episode on the border patrol. But we talked about that at length. And they
Agreed.
made a point that, "Oh," they made a point, "Oh, we can do both."
And
But
I
we
agree to
have
that.
not been doing both. We have not been doing both. It's not been working out that way at all. So let's let's rank order issue 1 and issue 2. Everybody says, "Oh, everybody has promised, 'Oh, I'm gonna get the border under control ASAP.'" Okay, well then do it ASAP and then worry about Ukraine. But let's categorize our issues. Issue number 1 to the American people and the American interest is whether or not we even have a country here because we don't seem to have any borders. If we don't have any borders, then we're not a country.
Right.
Then once we get that under control, then let's worry about other countries on literally the other side of the world.
Yeah, so I completely disagree with that notion. I do think we can do both. I think it would be kind of ridiculous for us being the world power, the country that all the other countries look to, and think that we could just forget that they all exist, especially when they're having problems. And I do think when it comes to the border,
That's a fair point.
the border is more of a situation where it's like, oh yeah, we can't deal with it because of Ukraine versus they're just not dealing with it. So I agree there. It's just like
Fair point.
Biden and the Democrats are just not dealing with it, which is actually does like, bro, close. I'm one of those people. Close the borders, and I also that's why I brought up to JJ. I would also argue that we should potentially, and I would be willing to discuss this obviously with someone. Potentially, if we once we close the border, made like illegal immigration nearly impossible to get in our country. After that, maybe loosening up the immigration standards would be a next step so people can still have the opportunity to get in the country as well. So I do think those could be a combined effort for
Yeah,
bipartisanship. But yeah, like Biden
yeah.
and Kamala, yeah, y'all are
I
doing
don't
a
want to
terrible
rehash
job.
all the stuff about immigration because we already talked about it in a full episode. I think
Facts.
that's a
Check the
fair
immigration episode. Facts.
I think that's a fair point about that. You know, we should be able to do both at the same time if we really are this world power. Um, I think it comes down to this though. I think whoever becomes president needs to just have the cojones to go over and like literally fly over and do like what Reagan used to do with like meeting all three people, what FDR, the famous picture of FDR, um, Stalin, and Winston, and have those 3 meetings with these 3 people and say, "Listen, this is what's gonna happen,
Oh
okay?
yeah, put your foot
XYZ is
down. I
gonna
agree.
happen.
Yep.
XYZ is gonna happen. Zelensky, you are going to cede this one territory, but you, Putin, or whoever, if he's still alive, because he seems to have very bad health issues, you, Putin, you're gonna knock this off right now. And if you don't do this, then this is what's gonna happen. There's gonna be tanks that land right outside of Moscow, and there's gonna be this, and
Yep.
there's gonna be an F-22 that just flies right over the top of the Kremlin, and it's just gonna do that every single day, like that sort of stuff. And I think that's what needs to happen.
I
Somebody's
agree.
gonna have to be the loser, and it might have to look like Zelensky's the loser of this,
Yeah,
because
Putin's too
he's been
prideful
saying,
Yeah.
But he's too prideful, which is why it takes a strong America to say, "Listen, you are gonna look like the loser, and you can blame me." America needs to
Agreed.
take the big fall. America, the president needs to be able to take the big fall, and that's what Biden's not willing to do. And that's why this has gone on for so long. Because he needs to say, "Zelensky, you tell your people to blame America. America's the one that came in and did the settling of this issue, which caused you to lose some territory, but it saved a lot of lives." And so far, nobody's willing to do that.
Yeah, I agree to that. I do think we need to do that, to stop the war and all that
But
stuff.
the thing is, we can do that without sending them another $42 billion or whatever. We don't need to send them any more money. That's my point. That money can be spent in education system, funding police officers, funding all these other things. That's part of our defense budget. Our defense budget doesn't need to go there. We need a negotiator to go over there. Is what we need.
If we had to pick between the two, I obviously would go negotiate or go over there, obviously. But I would. It really depends on this situation with Russia and Ukraine, because if Biden doesn't do it, and I do think he should, then just let it. We can't let Russia just have Ukraine. So that's like basically my stance on that one. We just can't let that happen, honestly. Um, but with that said, it just reminded me of a thing with Donald Trump, because he was said, well, one, he said he would the Russia Ukraine war would never happen. He would say Putin. He basically was like, I would never let Putin do that or something like that. I don't know what he meant by that. I really wish he went into, like, I was like, how are you gonna stop Putin from invading Ukraine? I would have been curious to see what Trump's answer would what that would be. And then he
I
also
know Putin. Putin's a friend of mine. I would have told him, "Putin, don't do it, Putin." And Putin, he wouldn't have done it.
that's probably would be his answer. He also said he prevented North Korea from sending nukes at us as well. That's what
I guess, like, the thing is, like, we don't really know if that's true or not. Like, that's one of the things that it could totally be true.
I
Like, I
guess
could
it
totally
could.
see Dallas going, "G, G, you don't wanna do this, G. G, I'm telling you, a lot of people have tried to send nukes at us, and I tell them, 'Don't do it,' and they don't do it. 'Don't do it, G.'" It's like, the thing is we don't know what everything he's done as a president. Like, that's not like, we did the whole episode on, like, how much of the government do they tell us and how much do they keep
Facts.
secret?
That's a
Like,
fair
we
point.
really don't know. Like, I think
But
that's
he
a lot
did
of
say that. He did so it's not even to keep it a secret. He was like he went out and said it.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'll be hey man, Trump, record everything. We have phones, record everything.
Bro, could you imagine if he had a podcast? That would be amazing. Like, his own podcast?
Well, Trump,
That'd be
yeah,
hilarious.
Trump is an entertainer. Like he obviously
I
came
think if
from the
all else
entertainment
fails,
business
Trump
for
can
real.
make it as Trump
He'll always be able to make money.
yeah.
100%.
Trump could make it as a stand-up comic, I think. Oh, yeah. I think if the whole president thing fails, he could be a stand-up comedian.
A bunch of
Get
political
that
jokes.
Netflix special.
Yeah, facts.
Oh,
And the
yeah.
last point.
Calling Rosie O'Donnell a fat pig.
Oh my goodness. The last point that was talked about in the Republican nominee panel is they talked about education. This is probably the one thing I wish I remember what Nikki Haley said about climate change, because I just blanked on this one. But I can remember when it comes to education, this is probably from my memory, I felt that this was their weaker point. Now she said obviously reading's very valuable, which you like. You like reading. She said we should incentivize more reading. She obviously said women should be in women's sports and only women, biological women. She said that as well. But I definitely wish she went in more depth. I don't. When it comes to other people, one thing I really didn't like, and maybe you have a differing opinion, because I don't actually know
This
your
at the
stance.
end?
Yeah, it was around the end. It was like the last point.
I don't think I caught this one then.
Oh, okay. So they talked about education, how to make the education system better, and most people were saying things that I really didn't like.
Hmm.
And I don't know your opinion on unions, so you may agree with them, but a lot of people were saying, well, one person, I think it was Pence. Don't quote me on that. One person says, okay, we can incentivize more private schools or something like that, and my the idea was there. It was trying to incentivize more charter and private schools or something like that. Allow families to be able to go to all these private schools and charter schools. My issue with saying that is like you're completely dismissing the public education system entirely. Personally, for me, I would send my kid to a private school. But if I'm the government, I want to fix the public education system. So completely dismissing the public education system for private schools. At that point, we're starting to enterprise education, and that's what we don't want. Obviously, we do not want to make education a
Yeah,
business. So I completely disagreed with that sentiment, because public education is how we grow, like the people who can't afford education.
sure, sure. So I'm not. I'd have to listen to that. Um,
Before, I'm going to say this other point, and then you can respond to all of it, just so you're caught up. And another big sentiment that they were saying about, well, one, Vivek said he's going to fire the Department of or disband the Department of Education, but a lot of Republican nominees were saying something like they want to get rid of teacher unions. Uh,
yeah,
so that's one thing, because I'm pro union for the most part, but I do think it's much more nuanced than going like, get as much money for you can, because there needs to be give and take. There have to be.
hmm hmm
But getting rid of unions, I don't think it'll ever be a good idea. To get rid of a union, I don't think it's a good idea. But yeah, those are some of
So,
the main points.
so by and large, I would be in favor of trying to rework the public education system. Um, I think possibly their point, and I'd have to listen to it honestly to get like what I would interpret from, um, is potentially they're saying if it comes down to it, I know they're in big favor. A lot of the Republican candidates are in big favor of school choice, which means funding and allocation that is what is allowing us to go to schools for free would go to allow people, like this is what Florida did, is you get school choice. So if your school system is failing, then funding that would allow you to send your student to that public school for free would be reallocated away from that school towards your student, and then you could go to a private school. And so effectively what would happen is you would get a stipend. So maybe sometimes you wouldn't get the whole thing paid for, but your funding wouldn't be attached to only if you go to the public school. It would stick with your family. And so if you want to send, like this happens in Ohio, I have some family that's in a failing school district. And so they take that money that would be going, that funding that would be going to the public school stays with the family. And so that family decides, so my cousins go to a private school with funding from the government that is now taken away from that failing public school. And so what that does, that incentivizes that failing school, if they want their funding, then they're going to have to increase their grades. And so they, obviously there's some, I think, a little bit of give and take there, that they could find other ways than just carrot stick, carrot stick. And because obviously taking money away, we know it doesn't work with police. Why would it necessarily work with schools?
Yeah.
There's some things that could be done there, I'm sure. I would have to look into more about the teachers' unions. I don't know a whole lot about those particular unions. By and large, I am pro union to a degree because we know that crony capitalism is a real thing. And where businesses can take advantage of workers, they will take advantage of workers.
Exactly.
I do think there's a level that it can go too far. And
Agreed.
from what I have heard, is that's kinda how the teachers union is. So maybe let's disband it momentarily until we can figure things out, and then, obviously, they have a right to have a union to some extent. I don't think Starbucks needs a union, personally, but, you know,
It
I'm not
really
sure.
it really depends on the details of the benefits
Yeah,
and the pay. I would say I agree with you. A lot of the things you said in terms of unions, I agree with you. I've already said that on an episode that should be already out when we talked about the pros and cons and unions. This episode was interesting, and it was very funny with me and Paul, because the guy that was Jonathan, who came on, was having internet issues.
I like
So
that guy.
yeah, we were having internet issues, and he couldn't stay on, so he had to leave early. So we just like, we were kind of like, bro, we don't know what to do now. So we talked about unions, but it was kind of a very silly episode, and I kept in all the hilarious cuts.
Eh,
But bro, it's a very, very silly episode. But we did talk
I'll have
about
to listen
unions a
to it.
little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of the things I said in there is that I unions are one of the best ways to keep capitalism in check, 100%,
Sure.
because of what you just said. But it can go too far if they're not taking into account how much they are taking away from the institution that they're trying to take it away from. Um,
Yeah, and I think that's possibly potentially, from what I've heard, is kind of what's happening with the teachers union. Is they're Paul is of the persuasion that they're not paid enough. That might be true for some of them. For other ones, it might not be true. And
yeah,
I
I
think the
would
prop
have to look into the pay because literally every teacher I met, they were getting bare bones money. So that's why I would
I
have
know
to
a
look
lot of
into that.
teachers that make great money. I know a lot of teachers that
At
make
public
hundreds of
schools?
thousands of dollars.
At public schools?
Yeah, some of them. Some of them,
Really?
not all of them. Some of them. And I think that totally depends on region, can
Maybe
depend on what was that?
tenure.
Tenure, yeah. It could depend on a lot of things. I'm sure private school teachers make a lot of money.
Well,
Um,
I actually saw this clip. I don't know if it's true. I might have to look into it. We may have an episode talking about teachers. Maybe you have a teacher on. Who knows? Um, but he said he found a statistic that said that teachers on average at private schools actually get paid less than,
really?
and that's
Maybe?
what he found. I'm so curious on this because a lot of the issues
I'm
that
sure
we've
it
talked
depends.
about.
Well, that would make sense to me because a lot of private schools are probably like the down the street Catholic school that gets paid based on what the church gets in tithes, and so it's a private education, but they're not making a whole lot of money because they only have like 12 to 15 students in the class sizes. So that would make sense to me.
But also,
It
like, I'm curious on the other benefits. Like, are they getting other benefits besides obviously the pay, working at a
could be,
private institution as well?
could be, could be. So
So
yeah,
there
that
could be
might be
other
a big
things.
benefit.
Yeah, I would be
Yeah,
curious about that. It's a very
I'll be honest.
go ahead.
I'll just be like, I don't know much about the whole teachers union thing. I know that a lot of conservatives have a vendetta against it,
Damn.
and um, I don't know much about it, to be honest. I think based on what I have heard, it might be justified, but it could just be one of the big talking points. And I don't just excuse me, been having like a lot of allergies, and now all of my sinuses are going down to my throat. Um, I just don't know much about it to have like an opinion of my own, other than what my party seems to say, what the other conservatives say.
Yeah,
So
for sure. We'll look into it. Have a future episode to dive into a little bit more concretely because the value of education is obviously important. The value of teachers are obviously the same. I guess if you have any other points, we can about education in a better are the most important people other than parents in molding society. Teachers. That's what I believe. Or they should be. They should be the most
yeah,
important.
I think I think they should be very well accommodated. Um, but I think it should. I think this would be one of the professions that should be the most merit based. Um,
Agreed.
in
Yep.
so insofar as your pay, I think this should be the pay where it most directly is accrued to how well your students are doing. And so how well are you preparing them? How well are they actually learning the material? I think that the category should not be on state testing. It should be on the class tests. So each teacher is judged and their compensation is based upon their overall class average within that institution's testing methods. And so the testing methods should be obviously held to muster, but if on the tests that Mrs. Sally passes out, if the students are all getting very high grades, very high marks in that within, within reason, then she should be very highly paid as opposed to Teacher Daniels that has like a whole bunch of failing students, not based on the state test, but based on the own tests that he's administering. Because if he can't even prepare you for his own tests, then like the downside of that is of course giving very, very easy tests so that everybody passes your tests, which we can't have that either. So there needs to be some obviously standardized metrics that are applied, but I think that's better than using state tests because some people just, no matter what you do, won't be good at taking state tests.
Especially when you're not in. Shout out on a true story, and they actually have an organization right now trying to
Yeah.
help teachers. Right. So basically, the premise of the movie is that there's this one newbie teacher, She's teaching maybe ninth grade freshman, and she's like new in town, right? She doesn't really know any better, and she's teaching at a school that adopted a program where they're bringing more underprivileged people into their school, and she has to teach all the bad kids, quote unquote, kids that were from like the hood, kids who
Um,
are from like potentially in gang lifestyles and face all that. So she has to teach that, and obviously it was a struggle at first because she's just a normal white lady from the suburbs, and now she has to teach these kids. And how she went about it is she went about it by like connecting to them at an individual level, getting them to read. She
sure.
incentivized reading. She took them to a Holocaust museum to see like this see tragedy, that the world is bigger than what you're going through and you can get past
Yep.
it. She like she gave them a diary so they can write in every day, and she would read every single one of their entries to see what's going
Sure.
on. Like she had a whole thing, and they loved their teacher so much at the end of the day that she stuck with them until they graduated. So she taught them 10th grade, 11th grade, senior year,
Nice.
and then she started an organization, like I said, that exists today. And it's a really good movie. It says she didn't stick to the curriculum, but she like they
Yeah.
were obviously got a lot because they ended up really smart. They did a lot after they went to college and stuff and all that good stuff, right?
Hmm.
I wonder how you would feel about teachers that stay with their students throughout their curriculum.
I see nothing wrong with that.
That's what I'm saying. Like, why do teachers have to stay with a grade? Like, why once they gain a
Well, typically
connection?
it's a certification thing, right? It's because that's what they're licensed to teach. And so you have to like when you're teaching something like 5th grade, right? You're the English teacher, history teacher, math teacher, science teacher.
All right,
But
yeah,
as things go up higher in grade, then it gets
you're
more and more specialized.
specialized in a subject, and
So
that's
yeah,
fair, very
that's
fair.
that's primarily the reason. And it's just because like some degrees, you'll sometimes for depending on the school level, I think some of them would require that you have a master's degree in a subject. And so obviously you're not going to spend the money to get a master's degree in history, science, English, and math.
Oh yeah, stay with your subject, obviously. So with that said, because it's a great point. That said, because she was an English teacher, she liked books and stuff. With that said, we should incentivize them with the merit program, obviously. So now they're incentivized to get keep on growing as a teacher, incentivize them to grow their education, maybe having programs that ensure that they can grow their education so they can teach other grades. Like there should be paths of improvement for teachers, because I don't really know like
Yeah.
what the paths of improvements for teachers are, other than like
They have continuing ed.
yeah, they continue get tenure maybe, and it's like
Yeah, but so a lot of times teachers, and I have a lot of teachers in my family, that's why I know this. They'll have to go to conferences, they'll have to go and like so my dad as a professor, he'd have to do continuing education, so he'd have to take a class here or there and give him the certification, go to a conference, show him the
is he a
certification, all that
college
sort of stuff.
professor?
So yeah, he's a college professor. I have several aunts and uncles and friends that are high school teachers.
Okay.
And so, they'll have to go to continuing education, and so they have to show certifications that they attended a
Oh yeah,
conference,
obviously got to
they
re
took
up
a
and stuff.
class, all that sort of stuff.
But I'm just talking about like improvement. Like, is there a route of improvement that they go through? I don't really know if
So
there is.
sometimes they can because they'll have the ambition to teach a certain grade or a certain class in the grade. So, like, when it comes to elementary school, they might get dealt the 3rd graders or 2nd graders, but they wanna get the 5th graders, and so then you have the motivation to kinda jive and do a little bit of politicking around the office, have good test grades that you might be able to get that position, that sort of thing.
Mm. It shouldn't be that hard. The merit should be there. Teachers, you should have a proper route to continuously improve for sure.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, we covered all the bases for the Republican nominees. Our final assessment, I mean, you guys already know if you've seen one of my prior episodes. My favorite was Nikki Haley. People who were saying I'm biased, I don't know how I'm biased when I had no like knowledge of any candidate until I watched the debate. So I just listened to what they said, and Nikki Haley came out on top for me. So Nikki Haley was the best overall candidate. Stand by that. I think if you put her against Biden, I personally think she would perform the best because she would appeal to moderates way better than Biden would. Um, so I mean that's the biggest thing for Nikki Haley because she's a Republican. Obviously, she's gonna get the Republican votes regardless. So when it comes to Democrats versus Republicans, it's how you appeal to the moderates that's really gonna change things. And I think Nikki Haley would be the best at doing that versus any other Republican
I
candidate.
think honestly, if we're being realistic, both sides. It has to do with because they're so polarized and politicized. It comes down to the moderates on the Democrat and the Republican. Whoever can appeal to the moderates better will have
Yeah,
the
but
better.
I don't see anybody on the right voting for Biden. Whereas like I can see people on the left voting for Nikki Haley.
Oh yeah, sure. Sure. I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's versus like if Vivek, nobody on the left is voting for Vivek or DeSantis or Trump.
Um,
And then everybody else is just not good enough at politics to
I'm not.
talk
I'm
about.
not sure if I entirely agree with that, but I could
You
probably
think
give it a
people on
shot.
the left would vote for Vivek? Is that the one you're
I
talking
think
about?
people. I think either actually DeSantis or Vivek.
Oh
I don't think anybody on the
no.
left. I don't think anybody on the left is voting for Trump. That much is obvious. But I
But
think
people
I
think
think
this.
Vivek has the best shot at getting some people to vote for him from the Democratic side, simply because he's unknown, right? As soon as anybody on the left looks at his policies, which they probably wouldn't do anyways, but they would see that he's every bit as conservative and right as Trump is. People on the left know who DeSantis is, but there's some of them that might pull over. Like so my uncle will be a statistic to show that because in 2020 he voted for he voted for Biden. Not a chance he's doing it now though. He kind of got I wouldn't say he got red pilled, but he got his eyes opened, I guess we'll say. Um
Oh, is
and
that the conspiracy theory one?
no, that's a
Oh,
different one.
okay. Okay, gotcha.
No, that's actually my father, my brother's father-in-law. No, my uncle was a huge lib, but then over like the 2020 pandemic stuff, everything that happened since then, he's like become very conservative or more conservative. But but so yeah, he's definitely whoever he's gonna
To
be a
the point
statistic
where
for the
he
other
would
side.
agree with DeSantis, because some of the things that DeSantis is
Oh
gonna
yeah.
throw out, like
Oh
he's
yeah.
big cultural war stuff, big
Oh, yeah. No, my uncle
anti-trans.
has done, like, a 180 switch. A lot of it came down to I think when he voted for Biden, came down to he's very much like a party man, so he probably voted Democrat his whole life, but it never really made a big deal. It never really he never really paid attention, and then
Yeah,
after, like, he saw everything that's happened, and then it came down to, his work. So he's a social worker, and so social workers are very democratic, just by
does he
and
not
large.
work
There's
there
just a very
anymore?
no, he does, but that's one of the reasons they really probably peer pressured him into voting Democrat, and now he just doesn't talk politics at the office,
Which is
that sort of
fair.
thing.
I just don't know how he would, because this social worker and DeSantis just don't mix to me, because of the policies that DeSantis likes to do. Like, so that's why I'm like, I mean, I think it is possible to hate Biden enough to potentially vote for someone on the right.
Yeah, but, like,
But
social work doesn't necessarily have to be a strictly political thing. Like, we just made a lot of things political that I mean, who States of America has a relatively menial actual influence on our day-to-day life. The people who have a
agree to
way
that.
bigger influence is our mayors and our governors.
Congress, that's what we say. Be an advocate in your community,
And
bros.
Congress, yeah, but a lot of it, because like, a lot of the bureaucracy this is, I think, one of the biggest things that a candidate like Vivek, who, if he does what he says he does, would have a huge influence on our lives because a lot of the bureaucracy, its actionable phase takes place at the state and local level.
Yeah,
So if we culled the bureaucracy, we would feel a lot more of it. But by and large, the president, he says what he says. He gets into office, and if he doesn't do much with the bureaucracy, with the EOP, then we don't really notice much of what he does on a practical day-to-day level. We notice some of the economic fluctuations, but by and large, their policies don't change our lives very much.
yeah. It really definitely depends on how they kind of connect with Congress. Honestly, at the end of the day, it's
Yeah.
how they connect with Congress. It's really gonna determine a lot of things. And
Which is what it was always supposed to be. It was always supposed to be Congress. It is Teddy Roosevelt that turned the office of the president into a very public. He's the one who started it, and then FDR continued that. But before that, that's why like people like Calvin Coolidge, a lot of these other presidents are relatively unknown as opposed to like the first 3 or 4, nobody knows after that. And then up until Teddy Roosevelt, nobody really ever and then after Teddy Roosevelt, when the presidential office was made a very public thing, everybody starts to kind of keep track of who the presidents were. But then you like between Teddy Roosevelt and FDR, we know like Woodrow Wilson, and that's about it. And then after FDR, we know a lot of them because
Yeah.
obviously World War II happened, and then they really became a very public figure because of a lot of the rules that FDR kind of broke to be president and the policies he made when he was president through things that he never really been done before. So it's the two Roosevelts that turned the public interest onto the office of the president. Before them, nobody really cared. But after them, now everybody cares. But the same is true is that they really don't have a tremendous influence in our day to day lives. Like they have somewhat of an influence, don't get me wrong, but by and large, it's our mayors and our governors that have a really big deal to do with how we interact with the society.
Yeah, for the most part, I agree with that. What like we say on this podcast that you got to be involved with your local elections. The easiest place to get a hold of a political representative is obviously in your district, in your area, to your mayors, to your governor, to your senator, because you vote for them, they go into Congress, and then their representative is gonna more align with your personal beliefs based off your voting versus the president, obviously, because
See,
the president is not creating laws at the end of the day, right? So we learned this in the government class. At the end of the day, we learned this in government class. But with that said, I think I said Nikki Haley I said would perform best against Biden. Who did you think performed best?
I guess Biden,
No, who do you think performed best in the debate panel?
I stand by what I said at the beginning. The Democratic base won that debate. Or
um uh,
Trump not showing up.
then I watched the interview and I think that interview was terrible. So I can't even say
Well,
Trump.
yeah, but we're talking about that debate, right? Who won that
Yeah,
debate? Trump, because he didn't show up to it. So he won
that's
that
very
debate.
fair. He said, "I'm winning by so much. I don't even need
Yeah,
to show up. Why don't I need to show
that's
up?
true.
It's like, show out
There's
you."
no reason for him to go, which I think he still should go, I think, but I mean, I totally understand him not going.
I think he's scared. But I will say this: Mike Pence, if he had to go up against Trump, would have been hilarious.
That would have
Uh,
been funny. Dude, it would have been Trump like, Pence, you fat pig of a coward of a man. How could you do this to me? How could you?
oh, I remember two of the other questions. Someone said, "But the president chooses whether to enforce laws. Look at the border, for example." True, the president enforces laws. We agree to that. And Nikki Haley, shout out to her. I think she would do an excellent job. But with that said, two of the questions
A
that they
simp.
did,
It's a simp for Nikki
bro,
Haley.
Nikki Haley sold me, bro. I saw like, bro, what are these great ideas? These
So
are
are you gonna
amazing.
vote for her in the primary then?
I wanted to see who like Paul told me is like, oh, that makes sense. Like, there's not going to be anybody really running against Biden besides like RFK. So it's like I'm not voting for RFK. So Biden or Haley, but obviously it would if I had to vote Republican, I would vote for Haley for sure. I would 100% vote for
So
Haley.
are you going to vote in the primary? I suppose
I
we could talk about
probably,
this after the podcast. So
probably we'll see. But we're still a ways away. We're still a ways away. Um, with that said, they also brought up two other things that I just remembered. They brought up a question about did Mike Pence handle January 6th well? And they also brought up the question if Donald Trump was chosen
yeah,
as the primary, who would support him based off your oath? And everybody rose. Oh yeah, DeSantis took a huge L because he like hesitated to raise his hand. Then he saw
but then he
Vivek
looked
raise
at
his hand.
yeah,
Yeah, then he rose his hand.
yep.
I'm like, oh, and then Chris Christie did the same thing. He hesitated. Then bro. I'm like, bro, y'all are cowards. The only one I respected in there was Hutchinson because he was like, I'm not raising my hand at all. Screw Donald Trump. I was like, shout out to you. I give you a point for that because you kept your integrity, right? Everybody else just, I mean, Nikki Haley rose hers immediately. Burgum rose his immediately. Pence rose his immediately, I think. and then Vivek,
Really?
obviously. Maybe I think so. DeSantis and Christie
With an L.
hesitated and then put their hand up. I'm like,
Well,
bro, what?
Christie, I didn't think raised his hand, did he? Or just
No,
kind of half rose his, he kind
yeah,
of like
yeah.
half rose his
Well,
hand.
initially he didn't. Then he saw everybody else's hands was raised. Then he put it halfway.
Yeah.
So that's
I
what.
noticed Santa's was like,
Yeah, that
and
was
then
that was terrible from DeSantis.
yeah,
That
that
was.
was bad for him. DeSantis just did all right, and the fact that he just did all right means he sucked because a lot of people really outperformed themselves. So yeah,
Someone in the chat said, "I think Haley's the best choice." They agree with me.
whatever.
I mean,
You're entitled to your opinion, I guess.
the right
Whatever.
opinion. Shout out moderates. We're the to be fair, like
The right
most.
opinion. The right
Uh,
opinion.
oh, okay, yeah, I got you. To be fair though, I think most moderates have pretty bad opinions. Not gonna lie. Bro,
I
bro,
agree.
bro. It's just like it's just me. I think counterpoints. He's moderate, so he has pretty good opinions. If it wasn't, I guess, if it wasn't for this recent like progressive craziness, I probably would be like a liberal. But like
Hmm.
they're just
I
crazy
think
now.
that's how most moderates are. Like they're libertarians at core, which is always what fit into the Democrats. But the Democrats went so crazy to the like just astronomically crazy to the left that now you guys are just moderate, but you're libertarian, liberal at your core. Me, there was never a chance that I was going to be Democratic.
Yeah, I just think we always gotta improve and change. Oh, they also said according to new Emerson College polling survey, Haley saw the largest increase in support among
Did she?
Republican candidates, jumping
I'm not
5 points
surprised.
from 2% to 7%, following last week's debate.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. Everybody I know that I've listened to, I agree that she really outperformed herself. So that's definitely, I believe, that's definitely possible. She's just still not my candidate. Like I'll vote for her if she wins,
Well, who's your
but
candidate? You didn't say.
first, I'm not going to endorse a candidate in the primary. Um,
Fair enough.
but
Fair enough.
fundamentally, she's a woman, so she's got that going against her. Just
Honestly,
kidding.
no. Low key. Well,
Half kidding.
yeah, low key. I'm like, how much like conservatives, like the ones that are obviously like more rational, they won't care. Like, how many conservatives on the far right are actually going to vote for like Vivek and Nikki? I'm still curious about that.
Yeah.
But
Like
also, with that said, if the Republicans are the first people to vote a woman as president, yo, how that's gonna look on
yeah, that
like
would be crazy.
that
That
would
would be
be pretty
crazy.
crazy because obviously
Yeah.
everybody thinks it's gonna be the Democrats to
The
vote the
problem
first
is
woman.
she still doesn't have a chance because Trump is so far ahead.
Agreed. So she has
So,
to hope.
but she could be a potential VP. That would be good for Trump if he had that Nikki Haley as his VP.
I don't think Nikki Haley likes Trump. So
Nobody likes Trump until they like Trump. You know what I'm saying?
Vivek likes Trump.
Like he's well, I know that, but they're all obviously still running against Trump. They think they would be a better president. But here's the thing, right? They're also still all politicians.
Yeah,
And
true.
all politicians, they want to be president. They believe that they are God's gift to earth and they
True.
were meant to be the president. And so they will do what it takes to get closer to that position. Nikki Haley,
Facts.
just like Kamala Harris called Joe a sex offender. And then he offered her the VP and he was like, okay, I love Joe. I think Joe Biden is the best guy on the planet. So they're all politicians.
You're not wrong there. I said Nikki Haley 2028. Like, yeah, one of the first thing I said was like, hey man, Haley, she's gonna do it. That over there, Nikki Haley, Burgum.
I personally, I like I'm split between Vivek, right? Like I think he could be good, but at the same time, I think he also could be full of crap. I just think it's not something that we're gonna know until we know, right? Same thing that happened with Trump. I do like DeSantis. I think he has a good track record. I don't know that he has the charisma for the job. I think he'd make a great chief of staff because he's so policy
He does get things
anal and
done.
focused.
Yep.
So he's a policy wonk, is what I've heard from a lot of people that know him and have met him. Um, he's a policy guy. He would make a fantastic chief of staff, which is really one of the. It's a more powerful position than is even is the president because he decides who gets what office. And so if he's that retentive about it, he could be a very powerful individual as the chief of staff. Problem is, Trump's never gonna pick him
Oh yeah,
for
he
his chief
calls
of staff.
him Santantis,
Sanctimo De
sanctimonious,
sanctimonious
the
or
sanctimonious.
Sanctus for short.
Oh man. Someone else said they only get credit for it. Conservative blacks are totally ignored or at best ridiculed. Shaking my head.
Larry
Uh
Elder, the black face of white supremacy.
oh yeah. Tim Scott had no presence again. I'm just bro, he was just up there smiling, bro. That's all that dude was there up
He
there
was like,
doing.
"I can't believe I made it."
Bro. Justice Thomas is hated by the left. Haley when she'll be hated too. If Haley gets close to being nominated, the left will attack her more than they've ever attacked anyone. Then they can't let the first woman president be a Republican.
That's just what you said.
That's hilarious, bro. Honestly, I could. I mean, they're definitely gonna attack her for a trans take about women, only biological women being like should play with biological women. Other than that, I mean, they're obviously far lefties are going to disagree with almost every point just because they're not leftist points. Um, but that's actually hilarious. Like, we can't let the Republicans have the first woman in office, so we're gonna vote against her. That's hilarious. Not gonna lie, but they're not gonna vote Republican regardless. So it's a
Yeah.
moot point.
I'm
But
very yeah. Anyways.
we talked about a lot, of course. I think this was a very interesting discussion, a little back and forth to talk about the nominees. Obviously, you got my perspective from the center, and then you got Jonathan's perspective as a Republican. Honestly, if Paul was here, he probably just agree with basically everything I was saying. Not gonna lie, probably agree from a leftist point of view. I think he said Nikki Haley performed the best too. So,
Yep.
shout out Nikki Haley for that. She did great. She showed out. She did her thing. Shout out Vivek for being the next Donald Trump. Out in the stage, being an internet personality out here, of course, with that smile. That smile that's capturing everybody. Of course, we know this. Shout out
Yeah.
DeSantis for sucking at politics. But so he's just not he's not good at the game at all. Bro,
Being a great governor, he'd probably be one of the best presidents we've had in a long time, I am sure. But he'd be like a Calvin Coolidge, like you know the famous story about Calvin Coolidge? There's a famous story. I think this is Calvin Coolidge. I might be wrong. I'm 90% sure it's Calvin Coolidge. He was a man of few words. And so he was at a party and somebody came up to him and said, "Hey, I have $5 a bet from a friend that I can get you to say 3 words." And he said, "You lose," and then walked away. Like, man of few words, but wasn't actually a bad president. And I feel like that's how DeSantis could kinda be, like, not a great charismatic leader, but a great leader because he would do what needs to be done, you know?
I can definitely see that from the Republican side. I would have to see how he starts implementing things because I'm unsure on like how deep he wants to go into this culture war stuff. Like, can he move beyond the culture war stuff if he becomes president? Is my question about it. So I'd have to see. But in terms of getting things done, DeSantis is actually one of those individuals that will get stuff done, and he got a lot done back in
Yep.
Florida. So, give him credit in that. It was just so funny. Every time they asked a question, DeSantis just would not answer the question. It's like he just did not answer the question. He tried to say something else. Like he tried his
Uh,
hardest. He's just not good at it.
FYI, my computer is about to die, so it's
This
dead
man
and
that doesn't have a charger, not prepared. But we went over the
no, but when
2 hour
I
mark.
plug in my thing, I don't have an extra plug-in for my cord,
Shaking my head.
so
He hasn't bought 2 cords yet. Shaking my head. But we went over the 2 hour mark, obviously. We went over a lot of things. So great episode per usual. Jonathan's a busy man, Paul's a busy man, but we'll get them both on the same time and have a very interesting discussion on whatever we talk about whenever that happens. With that said, hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Purple Political Breakdown. Rate it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Visit the website www.purplepoliticalbreakdown.com. Leave a review, send us an email, let us hear your thoughts. Tune in every Monday and Thursday, 8 p.m. EST, to catch us live on Twitch, Kick, Rumble, YouTube, whatever you think, let us hear your opinions about the discussion, the topic of discussion. Do we have solutions today? Not really, but do you want to vote for a candidate? Vote for Nikki Haley. You know what I'm saying? I vote for Nikki Haley. Put her. I stand by it. Republicans, if you want to beat Biden, I'm giving you the recipe right now. I'm giving the recipe right now. And I'm not even a Republican out here. I'm trying to help y'all out right now.
Hey, if we keep getting you to watch the Daily Wire, we'll get you on my team. We'll get you
Uh,
on the right side.
we'll see. We'll see how much times Matt Walsh can talk about aliens before.
Oh, I don't listen to Matt Walsh. I used to like him. Yeah.
Yeah, the aliens talk pushed it over the head. But shout out Ben Shapiro. I always like Ben Shapiro. So shout out him. Andrew
He's
Clavin.
actually
I do like him
he's
too.
actually one of the more liberal of the hosts. Actually, people don't like to say that, but he actually is.
Because he's logical.
He's relatively libertarian.
Brains. He uses this right here. The
Yeah.
right side is the middle side, honestly.
I'm
Y'all have a
saying,
good one.
I was saying like relatively, right?
Yeah, I mean compared to everybody else.
Relatively, compared to all the other hosts, he's relatively liberal.
I think Candace is probably pushing more and
I
more
didn't
to
hear
the
you.
right.
You cut
I
out.
think Candace Owens is just pushing more and more to the right, honestly. Like she's getting deep in the right. I think she
I
probably
don't
is.
like Candace.
Yeah, me neither. Not
don't like
anymore.
Candace
She got crazy for me. So it sucks to suck. Y'all have a good one.